What's up, guys? How's it going? Good evening.
Comfy.
Happy Monday night. Hope you guys are all doing well. What's up, everybody? Well, a very, very long time ago, I better be wearing a monocle for this. I'm afraid not. A very, very, very long time ago, I mentioned an idea. It was actually, I can tell you exactly where this idea first came from. Oops, wrong thing. A long time ago, how's it going, guys? Good evening. Happy Monday night. A long time ago, I was in Jesus Here's Toast stream, and Jesus Here's Toast and I, we both like to read. We both enjoy reading. And we kind of discussed back and forth, like, man, what if we started a book club on Twitch? Like, how cool would that be to, like, read and, like, talk about books and, like, have a good time? And this is, like, a long time ago. We were like, yeah, that'd be a great idea. Like, nobody would show up. It'd be, like, nobody would actually show up to it, but we would like it. And I think I mentioned the idea to chat a couple times. And you guys were like, yeah, you should do it. You should totally do it. You should totally do it. Why aren't we doing it? So... I think eventually I just, you know what, the fuck, why not? Let's go ahead and try it. Let's see how it goes. Let's try a book club. I feel like it's, you know, in the grand hellscape of Twitch, it's kind of hard to imagine between like nudity and you know, like all the fucking garbage on Twitch. Sometimes feels like a book club maybe is maybe not the best idea for twitch.tv, but you know, who knows? I mean, you got to try things. Stranger things have happened. So we're gonna be talking, we had our first book club. We decided to do it, and we chose a book. If you did not see the choice of the book, it is on the screen right now. It's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert Heinlein. And so if you want to know, so we had by the way, I've got all sub alerts off and TTS off because we don't want to interrupt people, so you don't have to worry about that tonight. However, please feel free to continue to give me money. Please feel free to do that. Anyway, to choose books for the first one, what I did is that I came up with a list of 8 books. And I wanted to make sure they were all books I had never read. So it wasn't like, here's 8 of my favorite books, and you're just going to look at them all. Like, I didn't want to do that. So all 8 books that I chose from different genres. They were all different genres, and they were all books that I had never, ever seen before, never read before, knew nothing about. So I think the genres were like historical fiction, mystery thrillers, science fiction, horror. It was like a whole nonfiction. There was a whole bunch of different genres of books there. And chat, you guys voted blindly on what genre, what book we were going to read. Hey, thank you guys for the hype train. Thank you for all the subs. I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. And the winner was science fiction. And that was the winner in the blind tournament. You guys had no idea what you were voting for. So the winner of the tournament was Robert A. Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. And that was 3 weeks ago. And I think 3 weeks is what we kind of decided on the timing for actually reading it and discussing it. And I think 3 weeks kind of worked out well. I think most people that were going to read, I mean, there's always going to be somebody who, like, they didn't get around to it. They didn't have time. That's always going to happen. But yeah, I think that was a pretty decent time. So how are we going to handle the discussion? So I've kind of got like some questions and some things I'm going to kind of interject here or there. But if you go on Discord here, let me go and show you over here on Discord. We actually have a lot of people in there already, actually. If you swap over to Discord, there down here on Discord is the book club talk. You can join this, and this is like a huge stage. It's all an audience. And if you want to speak, you like raise your hand in the classroom. And then we like grant you permission to speak. I am joined tonight. DantheVP has been. You can say hi, Dan. You can speak anytime you want.
Hey,
Dan,
Chad.
There's DantheVP. Hang on, let me go ahead and shout out DantheVP. I don't think he streams too often these days, but there's DantheVP. He is one of my moderators. We've known each other a long time. He's real. Yeah, he's real. Welcome to be here. Yeah, there he is. And if you want to speak, you can raise your hand when we get to a point if you want to say something. And we'll kind of go back and forth. We got 57 people in here. Feel free anytime. I love this idea, but I don't want spoilers. You'll join Discord for the future. I mean, that's fine. That's just how the format is. We're going to do it this time. It is the Dan the VP. Yeah, he's not just any Dan. He's not just any old Dan. He's Dan the VP. Very different. You have that.
Well, Dan.
You wrote an AI bot that reads books and teaches you about the book. You know, I somehow doubt that that's actually the essence of what it's like to actually read a book, but, you know, call me skeptical on that one. Anywho, Yeah, we're gonna get started talking about the book, and we're gonna right away hear from chat. So it's not just me talking, because it's gonna be a long night if it's just me talking. So why don't we go and get started? Why don't we get started, guys? Thank you guys for the hype train. Thank you guys for all the subs. Go and get started. You know what? We're gonna start with Dan. We're gonna ask him. We're gonna put him on the spotlight immediately. poor Dan. Dan.
Yes.
How are you, Dan?
I'm doing good. You know, good. Warm inside, it's cold outside.
It is cold outside.
Just how I
didn't read it.
Hold on, I've got it right here. I can start.
Just quickly flip through it. Dan, and so this question, you're going to be the first to answer, and then we'll turn it up to the rest of the audience here.
Okay.
In 1 or 2 sentences, we're going to limit only 1 or 2 sentences. What did you think of the book?
It was very easy for me to read, and I enjoyed how the author just like generally described things and kind of put his thoughts into words through the characters. I was a little mild on the end, but more just out of what I was personally looking for. Mm-hmm. It was a bit too kind of like right off into the sunset for my taste. It posed a lot of good questions, and I would have liked for some of those to have been answered before the end of the book. But overall, it was really easy to read, and I enjoyed it.
I don't know if you saw, but chat was accusing you of you didn't read it.
Oh no, I definitely read about that one character in that one time.
See, guys, he totally read it.
He said 2 sentences, and I gave 4, and you know.
That's fine. It's not a hard limit. All right. Well, let's turn it up to everybody else, and we'll let people speak, and we'll all weigh in. All right, we have the first person ready to speak here. Let's see. There we go. And this is
hey.
SAS Pro Guy. What's up, SAS Pro Guy? How's it going?
Going good.
All right, so same question, 1 or 2 sentences. What did you think?
The book was definitely interesting. It was sci-fi, but it was much more political than I was expecting. The biggest hurdle I had was just the sentence structure of the loonies. How they didn't use articles very much, and they never used the word the. So it took me a while just to be able to parse out what I was reading. At first, I thought I had like a bad copy of the book and there were words missing.
Yeah, I could definitely agree. Like, I actually my next question, you're preempting my next question, was what did you think of the way the book was written? But we'll get to that. And I agree. Like at first, it was like, it's gonna be the whole book of this. It's gonna be literally the whole book of nothing but like this writing. But I think after a while, I kind of like fell into it, and it was like, it's fine. You know, after you just kind of get used to it. More something you grow to like it, right? Just kind of get used to the bullshit.
I found myself just filling in the space. Like I was just reading it with the articles, how I would say it, and I felt like I was kind of cheating. But
yeah, like eventually your brain just fills in the words that are missing. It's like fine. That got easier for you when you imagine the guy telling you a story. Yeah, I see that. So how do we so there's a lot of people to speak. Hang on. We can invite our next person here. Let's see. All right. I'm still a little, bear with me, chat. I'm still a little new to this whole stage thing. It's a little new. Let's get our new one here. Let's see. Who do we got?
Hello.
Hey, what's up? This is Trisgo. What's up, Trisgo?
I'm doing all right.
Good.
So, like, overall, I really liked the book, but I think if the entirety of book 2, A Rabble in Arms, had been reduced down to like 1 or 2 chapters, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. It was kind of a slog to get through the center section.
Yeah, I kind of felt that as well. Like, initially, the first part I was kind of along for the ride. I was like, okay, this is an interesting premise. And then the chapter, book 2, or chapter 2, like, I really my interest kind of started to wane a little bit, and I was like, just get to the point already. Like, why is this dragging so much? Yeah, book 2 felt rough to me. I agree.
I mean, for what it's worth, it definitely made the excitement of book 3 like kind of almost worth the payoff, but it sort of felt like beating a dead horse by the end of it.
Yeah, I thought that the book really picked back up when Man and Prof go down to Earth again, and I thought that that was really interesting because that was like the first time we got to see Earth, like after everything, like when everything was going on. So I thought that that was a really cool part, and that kind of brought me back into it again. And I was kind of with it towards the end at that point, but I was kind of following.
That ended up being a bit of a whiplash for me because I felt like they spent so much time on kind of mundane things, and then all of a sudden, yeah, we're just gonna throw them in a ship and send them down to Earth. It was
Yeah.
we didn't even talk about this. It's like happening tomorrow.
Yeah,
And it was a little whiplash there, but I appreciate that they didn't kind of meander around it and they just sent them to Earth. But yeah.
All right, we got somebody else here. Let's go and invite. Same question.
Hi guys.
Hey, how's it going? This is Antonius. What's up, Antonius? How's it going? Oh, might be Mike muted. Up. It's probably your Discord settings. Might be that. All right, we'll let him work on that. Let me get somebody else. Let's see. Discord. You have to change like your input settings on Discord. You're on the air. Let him cook. Hey, Thori, what's going on, Thori?
Hi, greetings from Germany.
Oh, greetings from America. How's it going?
Very good, thank you. I did not like the book.
You didn't like
Not
it?
at all. No, I thought the first part was really interesting, and I was like, hey, where's this going? This seems like a really cool book. Then the second part was super boring. I almost gave up. It was like, oh my god. And then the last part was like, wait, we need to finish the book. And it ends. And everybody dies. And it ends. Okay. So I was like, what the fuck did I just read?
I think kind of more or less my opinion kind of lines up with yours. Like the strong beginning and kind of really slow middle, and then another strong, like the ending kind of redeems it like a little bit, but I think I kind of agree with you there.
Yeah, I think a lot.
I redeemed it a little bit, but it was rushed, I feel.
Yeah, probably a bit rushed, right? All right, we got the Muznik. What's up, Muznik? How's it going?
Hey, what's going on? Is my volume all right?
Yeah, I can hear you good. I think Jack can hear you.
Awesome. Cool. Amazing. So, to answer the question that you posed, I'm kind of in the same boat as you with the beginning was just kind of like, it was pretty cool, interesting. Hey, he's talking to a computer. What's going on here? Oh, they want to, overthrow the authority. Cool. Interesting. But then it kind of just felt like the middle was just them kind of going about day-to-day stuff. Mm-hmm. And as I said in chat, my interest kind of got piqued again once they started going to Earth, and it's like, okay, what's going on here? What's this? And that's kind of, that's when I got interested again. Then they had the whole, that the way that ending kind of played out was, I found it interesting. I don't want to really get into too much.
Yeah,
we'll spoilers and stuff.
I was planning on kind of going through like piece by piece, because there's probably some parts where like, oh, that part was really cool, and then that part was like really rough. I was planning on going through the plot like kind of step by step. We could probably like as characters, because we definitely want to talk about like the characters and that sort of thing, right? But
yeah,
seems like a lot of people kind of have like a consensus about like the beginning, middle, and end, like kind of close to one another. So
that's all I got for this at this point.
All right, thanks, Muznik.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you, Antonius. We can hear you now.
All right, okay.
We've all been waiting, Antonius. We've all been waiting. What is your opinion?
I liked it, but I also really like cyberpunk and dystopia, and especially like older dystopia. So this was kind of right up my alley. Mm-hmm. But I do agree the middle of the book was kind of like long, and felt like I was reading a history book where he was just kind of like, oh yeah, then we fought this person, or then we did this, and then this happened, and this, and it was like. But no, I wish they would have talked more about Mike. He was like my favorite part of the entire book, and like it kind of like ends abruptly with him, and I like kind of wish there was more of that. I kind
of agree that I felt like Mike was one of the more interesting aspects of the entire book, and he kind of gets like shoved aside in some ways. It's like oh, here's this
Yeah.
like new life form, and he's gained sentience, and like never mind about him. Let's go to war. and then like towards the end, it's like spoilers obviously for later on. He's like, oh yeah, he died. It's like, really? Oh, come on, man. They never even like resolve the whole like sense of humor thing. Like they never even find out did he ever learn the sense of humor? Did he get better about that?
And that was like one of my favorite parts about his character, because it kind of reminded me of like Data from Star Trek, where he never really got jokes, and then like the one time Q makes him laugh and it's his big deal. And like I was kind of expecting like that kind of payoff where he did something really funny, and that just never happens.
No, you're right. I never made that connection between Mike and Data from Star Trek, but I feel like that's a really good one, right? Like I would kind of think I was thinking like Asimov and like early, like all of his stuff about robots and sentience and stuff, but that kind of is exactly like where is the line between like artificial and like and life, like where does that begin? And it's kind of interesting, but he doesn't, but I don't think Heinlein really does much with that, right? He just kind of leaves it there. But
yeah, it's just kind of this neat idea he has that he never like goes into. So like I don't know, it kind of reminded me a bit of Gibson, but Gibson would have totally taken that to its end.
Right.
Kind of like,
yeah, maybe
oh,
maybe a Neuromancer might have been a better choice. I did read Neuromancer like a long time. Maybe that would have been a better choice for books though.
I love Neuromancer. That would have been real fun.
Yeah, the book was also published in 1966, and you have to remember like it was like one of the first, like if you think about some of the first science fiction books of their time, you know what I mean? Like I don't know.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I had to remind myself reading the book that like this dude was born in 1907 in Missouri. Like that's like that perspective and point of view, I think, kind of colors some of what was written.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a lot of space stuff too. Like he wrote Starship Troopers, Stranger in a Strange World. Like a very forward-thinking guy. Despite what you may think of the way he speaks in the book, like some of the terms he uses and stuff, he was pretty forward-thinking for his time.
Yeah. And this is the first Heinlein. Is this the first Heinlein you guys ever read? Antonius, did you read some Heinlein before?
No, I've seen Starship Troopers the movie, but I've never read the book, and this is really the first Heinlein. I've read a lot of Gibson. I've read a lot of Stevenson.
Yeah, this is the first. I think I tried to read Starship Troopers a million years ago, and I think I got like 3 pages in, and I was like, this isn't for me right now. But first one for you, yeah. What about you, Dan?
Oh, first by a long shot.
Yeah.
This is the first book I've read, so
It's the first book
I learned to read for the book club.
Well, I mean, everybody's got to start somewhere. Hey, Ari, thank you for waiting. Ari. You've been here for a while. Can you hear us?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Ari. What was your opinion on the book?
I liked it. Like, it was definitely a very easy, like, read. I definitely don't, like, outside of Man and then Mike, the computer, like, there weren't other characters. There were just, like, roles, I guess. And it was really, like, I didn't care about any of them. But I did like the bromance with the computer and Man.
Oh, you did a romance or a bromance?
Bromance.
Oh, okay.
Bromance. I mean, like, the book starts and ends with Man thinking about the computer, being introduced to him as a sentient, and then going like, wow, it's sad he's dead or gone or whatever.
Yeah. I think I agree that like most of the characters were kind of like very cardboard, right?
I mean, Professor seems like he's just like a clown, like that's like filling out philosophy, and then at the end they just completely ignored him. They're like, oh yeah, we did none of that. That was cute. The thing that I think in particular stood out to me is like, while I don't love his representation of women, there's like Wayo's the only interesting woman, and she just becomes Man's wife at some point and stops existing. I do like the way that it plays at like polygamy, because like polygamy is like more in vogue than it has been in the past, and like it's interesting view of how marriage and relationships and everything that like goes into that I thought was deeply fascinating. Like I thought that was the most interesting thing in the book to me.
Well, that was kind of like, I guess it was born out of like a necessity, because I think, did they say that on the moon it's like 2 to 1, the men outnumber the women. So they set up this like, it's like they have to set up this polygamist like kind of way just to survive. And that's why the families become all like intermarried and stuff. So it's kind of like a weird like survival mechanism for the moon, right?
I think part of it is also the genetic makeup, that it's like really easy in a small dense population to like run out of like compatible relationships unless you're like really diversifying who all's having kids with whom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's also like I think Yo said she had like so many babies, right? At that point, like
yeah,
I was like, oh, okay. The moon is a total sausage party. Well, it's kind of weird about it because it's like it's got these like at one part it's like so progressive. It's like, wow, what a crazy progressive idea for the 1960s. And then you'll read another line and it's like, oh, it's not actually that progressive, is it? It's like
he did take a shot at Kentucky and like make fun of how backwards they were even in 2027, and I really loved that. As a Southerner, I loved the shot at Kentucky.
Felt a lot like Bioshock 2. The moon started it started as a penal colony a really, really long time ago, right? And it eventually like evolved. That was another thing that was really eye-opening to me. Like it was like I was very confused by that. And it didn't feel like it really doesn't make sense that the moon is where they grow wheat, and that's like primarily what they make on the moon is wheat and ship it back to planet Earth. Like of all the things you would make on the moon, like and send it to Earth, that seems like the moon has ice. I mean, like it's science fiction, so you kind of have to like accept it, right? But that's just something like really, like that's okay, interesting, I guess. Cheese would make more sense. The Earth can't grow anymore. Never explain why they can't. Well, I think it's kind of hand waved. Because the Earth has like 11 billion population, I think is what he said, and it's like super overcrowded or something, and they're starving anyway.
There was some talk about like certain countries were more dependent on the wheat, like India, because they had so many people and not enough land, whereas other countries weren't as dependent, and so they might be more willing to side with the lunar colony. But it was like implied that there was a little bit of nuance there, but didn't really go into depth.
India was 90% dependent. It was contract involved. Okay, but there's probably some little parts of the text that I didn't quite catch. But next caller. All right, hang out, relax. We'll get somebody else in. We'll get plenty of voices in. Don't worry. Oh, we already had Ari. Oh no, wait. Next person. Sorry. Sweet chick. Hello, sweet chick. How are you?
Hi. I'm good, thank you. It's 1:23 a.m., but I'm up and I'm here, and I'm happy to be here.
Eurofolk are up super late for this. I appreciate that.
So let me just start by saying I didn't actually finish the book. I had a little bit of a hard time getting into it, but I did get like halfway. I just before we started, I got to book 2. So I got to the part where the revolution starts. But you know, there were so many things I had an issue with.
Really? But
I think it's mostly like you talked about a little bit ago. The book is like fucking 50 years old, and it's just. I've read 1984. That was a slog, and this book has sort of some of the same qualities where you need to actually be in the right headspace for the language barrier. I mean, I'm okay at English, I would say,
but there's still a language barrier. In Swedish?
No, I was reading it in English.
Okay.
I mostly read in like the original language if I can.
I mean, that's fucking impressive to me. Like reading in another language like that's crazy.
Well, you know, in Sweden we started learning English by the time we're like 8. So it's sort of ingrained in us by the time we're as old as I am. But also the political stuff. I'm not a super political person, so that part just sort of glossed over my head. No, wait, that's not the phrase. Well, you know what I mean. And it was sort of like parts of. I know you haven't read it. I gifted it to you a while back. Yes, guilt trip incoming. Metro 2033.
Yeah, I don't think I've read that yet.
There are some sections of that's very political, and it's just like. I'm just okay. When do we get to, the fun stuff again? But, the book's still interesting to me, especially, like you all touched upon, the whole men to women ratio, the polyamory, polygamy stuff. It's just, I'm not sure I'll finish it, but it's interesting, and it's always good to read something that like transports you to a different time where you get in someone else's head. Like this was pre so many things. Like it's just a very interesting historical document of how they thought the future would be, but there's like the world building to me. I just kept wondering to myself, did I miss, why are we even on the moon? and then India, is this India on our planet? Or is there an India on the moon? Like, I just, but it's probably because it didn't catch my attention very well.
Well, in some ways, like you point out how like political the book is, and like the politics, I feel like are way, like he's way more interested in getting into the nitty gritty of the politics, and like all the other science fiction stuff is kind of shoved aside, and it's way more about like the politics of like this person's ideology, that person's ideology, and like what are we going to do about like it's way more interested and it's more concerned with that than it is about all the science fiction scenarios. And that is kind of a surprising thing about the book. At least I was surprised by that. It's like, oh, okay, it's like a super political thing then. I see. He also likes to reference historical events to all of his politics. Right. He does that a lot too. Right. It's good stuff.
I don't know if I have anything else to say, but thank you for letting me speak.
Oh, not at all. Yeah, feel free to stick around. We're going to talk about other stuff too. So you can weigh in again if you want. That's totally fine.
Okay, absolutely.
Somebody else and a few more. We'll probably maybe move on to the next question here. So our first question was, in one or two sentences, what did you think of the book? Was like our first one. Politics in my sci-fi. Well, I mean, sci-fi can be a vehicle for anything. So like political science fiction is totally fine, but sometimes it's hard when you see like, oh, we're gonna spend 100 pages talking about the politics, and then you leave aside like the more interesting aspects, like the how alive is Mike. You know what I mean? And that's kind of left aside and more like focus on the politics. Like, what about this thing I was kind of more interested in? You know what I mean? Like, or character development or plot or anything like that. I think both character development and plot are kind of left to kind of spin its wheels a little bit for at least several hundred pages or so while they talk about politics, right?
And I agree on the world building part as well, because like it's like the end of the book, and I feel like I still don't understand. Okay, how far apart are these locations? How exactly can you travel to them? Is the tube like a connected thing, or is it like an independent And it's like all of these things that feel like they were so important, like just are never fleshed out.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have a better idea of like how the moon worked and stuff, and maybe like it definitely gets a bit muddled in my head too after a while. Just like to me, it was like Earth and Moon, and that was it. Yeah. All right, we got somebody else in. What's up, Jen Lu? How's it going? Can you hear us, Jen? Jen, are you there? Or we'll let Jen worry about it. So you know what? I don't blame if you didn't get your mic working immediately. I don't blame anybody, because the Discord audio stuff is very confusing. Snake. All right, we got Thorgot. Hey, what's up, Thorgot? Call is coming from inside. This is how work team calls go.
It feels like work.
Oh no.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, hey, Jen. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, both of us? Or just me?
All right, Jen, what did you think
of
both
of you?
Why don't we start with Jen?
Hello.
Hey, Jen.
Hey there. So I read a lot of Heinlein over the years. I've loved it like in my 20s because I love politics and love sci-fi and all that, but like all of his books are so similar to me in that he starts off with these really interesting like progressive ideas, and then the middle's a slog, and then it kind of goes off the rails like at the end.
So I'm like, this is my first Heinlein. I think Dan said it was his first as well. You've actually read like a lot of Heinlein then?
Yeah, so Stranger in a Strange Land is still one of my favorite books, even though, like, as we've said, these things are not aging as gracefully as we would like them to. I have several others on my shelf. Time Enough for Love is one. Cat Who Walks Through Walls is another one.
So you're saying it's like a trend for Heinlein, for the beginning being all, like the cool, the middle being blah, and then the end being better again?
Yeah, it really does seem to be that way. But like the ideas that are good are like so good, but he like has, it's like the storytelling ability isn't there to like support the ideas sometimes.
I mean, it's really hard to. I feel like that opinion kind of lines up exactly with my own. Yeah, I really agree with what you're saying. Now, I don't have the experience having read the other Heinlein books, but if nothing else for the ideas, then would you say that the other Heinlein books are worth it for the ideas in those as well?
I would suggest Stranger in a Strange Land for sure. I would not. I don't know. Time Enough for Love is such a weird book. I really wouldn't suggest that one, but I really like Stranger.
Book was bad. All right. Well, it's nice to have a perspective somebody actually has read these books. Who knows? Who knows? Well, thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. Stick around. We definitely want more of your opinions. Thorgot, what do you got to say, Thorgot? Thorgot? This man with his TTS.
All right.
Oh, there he is. I was gonna
turn on.
I was gonna say this man with his TTS, you can't stop him, but you get him on Discord, you got him on the line. He will not speak.
Yeah. Well, I first want to say that I quite liked it, despite its obvious flaws. One thing I didn't like was that Heinlein brushed aside the fact that in his libertarian paradise, a lot of people die unnecessarily. I'd say it would be perfect if it wasn't for the syntax, the over-the-top fascism, the sexism, the racism, the boring politics, the boring fight scenes, the boring secret catapult side plot, the main character, the side characters, the early book, the mid book, the late book, and the ending. But other than that, perfect.
I was waiting for the early book, the mid book, and the late book. I was fucking waiting for it.
I was wondering if he was gonna do book 1, book 2, book 3, but yeah.
Robert A. Heinlein, age 9, always wanted to write a book about the moon. The mic drop. But he's right though. Right? Let's see. We will probably, let's get some more people in here. We got a lot of hands are being raised. We got Zappa, and let's see what Zappa's got to say. Let him cook. Hey, thank you for the gift subs. Silent 10 gift subs.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hey, Zappa, how's it going?
Going well. I feel like I agree with a lot of the opinions on here. I think the second book, the political tit for tat and all that stuff, would have fit better if this was book 1 of 2 or even 3. If this was just something we could expect throughout the book, but putting it with what we have, it did seem incredibly rushed at the end. And like you were saying, they dropped all the really interesting sci-fi elements and the implications of having this supercomputer that's sentient. And I feel like it really, a lot of the conflicts were really non-existent. I mean, there's fighting and stuff, but everything kind of boiled down to, well, we have a supercomputer, so we win,
Yeah, Mike does kind of solve a lot of the problems that they may or may not be facing, right?
Yeah, like early on, it's they're talking about starting this conspiracy for revolution, and Prof is saying, well, that you have to expect, betrayals in any sort of conspiracy. And I was like, okay, and Mike just fixes that up. Okay, never mind. We've got this all figured out. We can have secret communication between everybody, and that's not a problem anymore.
Right. I feel like you had a really interesting idea that you thought it would have been benefited if it had been expanded into more books.
Yeah, just more. Someone mentioned Whiplash, and I definitely got a sense of that. You have an entire, the middle book was dedicated to this on Earth, political stuff, and I remember the actual coup of overthrowing the Warden was what, 2 pages.
Yep.
It was kind of like, okay, yeah, they murdered that girl. Okay, revolution's on. Let's do this. And then they mentioned knocking out the oxygen, and then we won. We did it. Our supercomputer beat them.
Right.
Well,
Mike
I
betraying
think that's-
them would have been interesting. That would have been interesting for sure. Probably would have
Absolutely, that was something I was expecting. You know, everything's going so smoothly because they have Mike, who's taking on more and more responsibilities. You know, putting words in Manny's mouth, and kind of taking on his own authority, not just waiting for requests and programs.
Mhm.
And I thought the betrayal was coming, but then there we were, like 2 pages before the end of the book, and Mike is still just doing his job,
or at least like a bad joke that didn't play right, because like it was perfectly set up.
Oh, like one of Mike's bad jokes, as in he gets a lot of people killed.
Yeah,
yeah, that would have been good.
The political stuff, to me, I felt like the end had to address it because they spent so much time on it, but then like none of the larger questions about all these people find out that they've been lied to and they've been censoring the news and that a computer was this individual, like none of those questions even had to be asked. And it kind of made that book too kind of like, what was the point? Why did you tell us all these things when nobody has to answer for any of their actions?
Yeah, I don't want to say like it neatly cuts everything in half, because like it neatly cuts it all off, and it's just like it wraps up in a nice little bow. It just kind of abruptly chops it off, and it's like that's it, it's over, and it's like aw. And I guess that might be a point where I was actually the book actually made me feel something, because I was like, oh, what about Mike? You know, like, oh, he just doesn't exist anymore. And it was interesting at the end when Man is talking about like he's still out there somewhere, like maybe we could bring him back or something, but probably not, you know, because like I guess it was because his circuits had all been like destroyed by the bombing or something.
I do think that like Heinlein was trying to be a bit more philosophical, but didn't have like it for being so old, he might not have had like the words, because like I feel like he was trying to say that like Mike only existed because of like this random assemblage of parts, and then since some parts were disconnected, they really didn't know how to create him again, because it was kind of like a miracle that he existed to begin with.
Yeah, you kind of have to wait for him to be born again.
Yeah, and it could have gotten there, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of how the book begins. Like the book begins, and so if I'm sure there's probably some people in chat who didn't read the book, and that's totally fine. That's totally fine. Dan, make sure you mark an F next to everybody's name in the chat who didn't read the book. Got to save their grades for their report cards. Oh, yeah. But that's fine. But so the character F's in chat. But okay,
F's
so
chat.
There you go. The protagonist, well, the main character, I guess you could say, is Man. And he is a one-armed dude who used to drill on the moon, and he because he lost his arm, he then works on the supercomputer Mike, and Mike is like a nickname he gave him. And I feel like the book actually begins kind of strongly, where it's you find out that Mike has kind of so Mike is the computer that handles like everything on Luna. And Luna is what they call the moon. He handles like the communications. He handles like the shipment of wheat back to the planet, back to Earth. And then like, I guess just all at one point, like nobody really plans this. Nobody even knows about it except for Man. Just like essentially all the circuits just happen to become like connected at one point. And all of a sudden he's just like alive. Like he's just aware of himself, and he like exists out of nowhere. And that's kind of like where the book begins. I thought it was kind of a strong beginning, and I thought it was kind of interesting, like right off the bat at first. And that's kind of the content of the first chapter. So one of the first things Mike does, the computer, is that he's like incredibly intelligent, but he's like a child. And yeah, it kind of goes nowhere, but it's kind of funny. He tries to figure out what humor is. So like, what does he do? He charges, he gives somebody a debt of like 10 trillion credits on the moon. Like he's like all
He
of a sudden
pays a janitor, like he overpays a janitor, like his salary plus like $10 billion.
right. Yeah, so it leads to like a conversation of like Mike and Man talking about what is funny, what is not funny. And that's all the first chapter, which is like kind of interesting. And then then the second chapter, it's kind of that it's almost like immediately kind of out the window. And the second chapter, Man ends up going to like a political rally, right? And at the political rally, that's where he meets like this like political force that wants to like free Luna. They hate the Authority. The Authority is kind of like the super repressive people who live on the planet, right? Dead microphone and Mike. Yeah, they killed the microphone and Mike wanted to know why. Is that exactly why it was? I read the beginning of the book was so long ago. It was quite some time ago. But here, let's get some more people talking. That was just not just me talking. Brutal Camel. What's up, Brutal Camel? How's it going? You guys feel free to raise your hands anytime.
Hello?
What's up, Brutal Camel? How's it going?
Hey, long time viewer, first time caller.
Well, glad you could join us. What's up, dude?
Yeah, I didn't read the book. I'm sorry.
Well,
pick somebody else.
All
Hello,
right,
man.
Thanks for joining. All right, let's maybe the next person will actually have read the book. Hey, thanks for watching, man. All right, we got T-Joint. T-Joint, did you read the book?
I got up to book 2.
You know what? That's better than our last guy.
So I want to reflect on some things some previous callers have said, comparing it to Star Trek and Asimov. And I think it's way more in line with Star Trek, where the technology just kind of works, and it is very much a vessel for political and social things to happen. Whereas Asimov will care to tell you at least a little bit about the science behind the things that are going on.
Right.
And I'm kind of very much in the Star Trek camp of like, as long as the technology works and we can go to the moon, or we can go into warp drive, or we can beam down, or whatever we need to do, that's fine.
Well, yeah, it's like the science that exists. It's all just nonsense to allow these other things to happen. You know what I mean? And what's weird about like the science is that, you know, as we get closer, like, you know, Star Trek shows you these crazy communications and, you know, a society where people can get along, you know, regardless of their race and that sort of thing. And like those things kind of end up becoming actually real over time too, right? So it's like, it's kind of weird how that kind of crosses over. But
yeah.
I did read the book. I would like to comment on the cover. I consider myself a pretty great judge of books based on cover. Well, we'll get to you later.
I do feel like the idea of the catapult, and like because that played such a crucial role in the relationship with the Earth and the moon and kind of the political situation, I did appreciate that felt really well thought out and described. I don't know how realistic it would be, but that is kind of the foundational part of this unequal relationship. I felt was like a good point in where that sci-fi kind of met the political situation that Heinlein wanted to tell.
So that's kind of where like
I also want to comment on like this book, reflect on what a lot of people have been saying. This book was almost woke. It had a lot of really progressive, like really core communist things to say about labor and giving power to the people who are generating the labor, and how all labor should be equalized, but then like say things like women are good at birthing children and that's their job.
Well, it's like weird. It's like an uncle at Thanksgiving who's like, he has all these political opinions like, wow, yeah, that uncle's great. And then he'll say like something incredibly sexist or like incredibly racist. And you're like, oh my God, like, never mind. like what the fuck?
But also like, it's okay for a 60-year-old book to not age perfectly and still get good things out of the book.
I was very surprised, and we haven't talked about it yet, but like the role that like China played versus like how demonized America was, and for this to be like in the 60s, like that alone would have been like, I don't know if like Heinlein was just like playing on a counterculture, and like wanting to be, and I don't want to say like anti-American in like present day sense, but in that time, like I don't know if that was the point, was to be like really anti his main audience's state. But
well, I read a little bit about Heinlein because I'm not very experienced with Heinlein at all, but I read that he would often, like I believe man is described as like dark skinned, and the like people on the moon have like their whatever their backgrounds are, like it's so mixed up that like nobody knows what their background even is on the moon anymore. And I think like he would go out of his way to describe characters as like dark skinned and non-white. And I feel like he really, and I was reading that was something he liked to do, was to mix with people's expectations back in like the 1960s, you know, and like people would expect their protagonist to be like a white dude, right? And when he like throws that out, and what's funny is that you look at the old school book covers, and the book covers would show a white dude, but he's not described as a white dude in the actual text of the book, which is kind of interesting. So it's all about like expectations and the audience, and it's kind of funny the way like, and I think the only thing I would say is that I feel like it's important not to look back on a book from 1966 in the year 2024 and being like, man, how backwards this book was. It's like, it was 60 years ago, man. Like, come on. You know, like I'm saying like don't forgive it, but you gotta like understand the context it was written in. You know what I mean? Right. You need that perspective. Starship Troopers does that.
I wonder if his concept of race on the moon was his projection of like America 2 on the moon as like in the sense of a melting pot.
Right. That's an interesting idea, right? Like a true melting pot where people's backgrounds don't matter and it's just people trying to survive, that sort of thing. It certainly makes the book better. Anyway, thank you very much. Very interesting perspective. Let's get a few more.
All right, thank you, Barb.
Oh yeah, anytime. Feel free to stick around. Let's see. I'm just kind of going through, and we'll just kind of hit plot points as we go. And what's up, Floating Cozy? How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Okay. So to start, I actually just finished the book at 7 p.m.
Oh, okay, just in time.
The suspension started. Yes. So at first I thought it was kind of a hard read for me to get into just because of how it was written. With the broken English and everything. But overall, I say the book was okay. To touch on what some other people have said, I liked how I thought it was cool how like on Luna they were all, you know, working together and whatnot, and they kind of had like less crime and stuff. And then when they went to Earth, how they described North America still having like issues with skin color, and how places weren't as safe on Earth like on Luna. I at one point I know he describes how they can leave their doors unlocked on Luna versus on Earth you can't do that.
Yeah, when they actually went to Earth, like it was like, ugh, like Earth was, they did a good job making Earth seem kind of like gross, didn't he, compared to the moon?
Yeah, and it was supposed to be set in 2027, so I mean that's not it, you know.
Yep. I found it very interesting. Also, on the perspective of like how he handles like the women situation and everything. I think it was kind of cool for being written in the 1960s on how, because the men outpopulated the women, how women still had more say and were kind of respected more on Luna. I mean, even though they still, you know, were used for birthing and such. But I just found that kind of an interesting concept, because you usually, at least from some books I've read that are older, usually women are still more stereotyped as in, you know, being sexy and all this stuff. So I found that pretty
Did you get like tricked by the book? Because I feel like I got kind of tricked by the book, because they introduced a character of Wyo, and kind of early, like I think that's in chapter 2. I'm like, oh man, this Wyo's a cool character. Like I'm really excited. She's gonna have like a big part to play, and she's gonna be really important. And then kind of like halfway through the book and like towards the end of the book, she kind of like disappears and like doesn't do anything anymore. It's like, oh, I was kind of disappointed by that a little bit. It's like she was cool.
I thought she was gonna have a bigger part to play for sure. I was surprised how it went from her being like this kind of bigger character in the beginning and then just completely falling out of the story.
Right.
It was an interesting, like it was an interesting counter to the professor early on, because it was like, here's, you know, these two sides of this political, you know, these two disagreeing parties that both want the same ends, and it just ended up being the professor running everything, and Wyo was just like there when they needed a character to fill that role to tell the story, and not really having any presence.
Right.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And then one last point I wanted to make. I feel like the book would have benefited more if it was a bit longer and gave more detail, because I feel like there was a lot not covered and a lot left out. And to me, I feel like I'm still missing pieces and don't quite understand
What do you think should have been expanded?
I think they should have expanded more on kind of like the situation on Terra, which is Earth, and the situation on Luna, and kind of, I guess, more background on like what was going on with it was wheat or whatnot.
Right.
And how all that coincided together.
Well, it was weird because like if you didn't, I know some people in chat didn't read the book, and that's totally fine. So the moon's primary export to Earth is wheat. So like, and because the Earth is so overpopulated that it depends on the moon's wheat to even feed its population at all. So after they have a political meeting, and the Authority breaks it up, and they actually kill some of the loonies. Some of the people that live on the moon that were at the protest get killed. That's where Man and Wayo escape, and they like hide away, and they try to like escape the Authority, right? And so that's when they start to talk to Mike. They bring Mike in, and then they bring Prof in, and they basically like, they kind of like on a whim. It's kind of funny to me because they decide to have a rebellion, and it kind of seems like Man doesn't really care, like he's not really into it. It's pretty much just Prof and Wayo decide to have a rebellion. So it's like 2 out of 3 people decide to have a rebellion. It's like, all right, I guess we're gonna have a rebellion or not. And they start asking. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just feel like, yeah, Man and like Mike were kind of just like pulled into it.
Right, exactly. And then they start asking Mike for like they start asking him for like statistics, because he's a supercomputer, right? So they're like, what kind of odds are we gonna get? Like, what's gonna happen in this many years? So what they discover, what Mike calculates, that given the best case scenarios, in 7 years the moon's gonna be starving, because they're shipping away all of their ice and all of their food away. So in 7 years, the moon's going to be starving. And in 9 years, the moon is going to be cannibalism. Like, it's going to be cannibals on the moon killing each other because there's not enough food. And that like horrifies them. They're like, oh my God, like how, that's no way. How can that possibly be? How can that be possible? So then they ask Mike, what are their odds of them like winning the rebellion? And Mike tells them their odds are like 1 in 7. And they're like, hooray! we can do it. We've got odds.
Yep.
Yeah, if I was running the moon, not only would they have all the soup they can eat, they'd be totally fine. But that's besides the point. Put me in charge of the moon. I'll sort them out.
Yeah, I agree. But overall, it was okay. It just took me a bit to get into. It was a struggle to get through, in my opinion.
It's so nice when a book like pulls you in like right away. But when like a book, it's like, I feel like you can tell within like 20 pages that like, oh, it's gonna be work, isn't it? Like, you're not gonna pull me in, are you?
Yep. that's how I felt.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt too. It's kind of how I felt a little bit too. All right, let's thank you so much, Floating Cozy. You were great. Stick around. We're gonna we can weigh in again if you like. We got Sir Spork 76. Hello, Sir Spork. How are you?
Hey, so I almost finished the book. I'm 3 chapters from the end.
Oh, that's okay.
But
I hope we didn't spoil you too much.
Oh, it's fine. I end up getting spoiled in a lot of media. Just as friends tell me things. But I went into the book completely blind. I didn't read the summary or anything, and this might impact like one of my criticisms of it. Going in completely blind, after the chapter with the meeting that got broken up by the Authority, Man and Wayo retreat to this like hotel room, and then they spend like 3 chapters there. And it was like, listening to the audiobook, I kept like looking at my watch and being like, what even is going on in this book? Like, well, where are we going with this? And I was like, I really missed him talking with Mike, because him talking with Mike had like kind of the same quality as the chapter in The Hobbit, Riddles in the Dark, where it's like you have this like personable character talking with somebody who you don't really know, like does Mike have like actual humanity behind him, or is he like do you have to treat him like that kid from the Twilight Zone with psychic powers? Like, is he just like a godlike being that has no like social limiters or anything, and he'll just do what he wants, and you have to like entertain him?
That's a really interesting. I hadn't really put that connected, but I feel like you're absolutely right that like if I think about what were my favorite parts of the book, it was probably when Man and Mike were talking. Those are probably like my favorite parts of the book.
Yeah, and I was kind of sad that they didn't Heinlein didn't like elaborate on like it could have been like interesting to like have to keep Mike happy. Like, what does Mike want?
Yeah.
Maybe we have to like give him like we'll like spend time in the chapters like talking about, oh, we're gonna plan jokes with Mike, because like he lives in Mike lives in blue orange morality land where all he wants to do is play jokes, and he makes that like comment towards the end after they rod from God Earth, and Mike is like, oh, this is what an orgasm is like, and it's like, oh, Mike could actually be a horrible monster if you give him the right
saved it so he could he saved it so he could re-experience it whenever he wanted.
Does
and
Mike,
I almost feel like Mike dies at the end so that Heinlein doesn't have to like wrap up what happens to this like living embodiment of like we're not alone in the universe, and also the other living thing in the universe doesn't share morality.
So somebody in chat was like, wait, what? We should probably unpack that a little bit. So
yeah,
the rebellion, so they decide to rebel because they find out, like they say that like the moon is shipping its lifeblood out of the moon, and they're sending it to Earth. And they think it's crazy because why do they need ice water from the moon when they have water on the Earth, right? And I feel like that entire setup of wheat from the moon is all a big plot hole anyway, because none of it makes sense at all. So, but like, just hand wave that. Just don't worry about that. So the way they decide to fight the Earth is they can use the catapults on the moon, which they use to ship where they used to ship wheat to the Earth. They can use that to throw rocks at the Earth, like literally throwing giant moon rocks at the Earth. And these like collisions will be like gigantic bombs basically going off, right? And I think later on that does happen. And is that when the computer, I think it was like a week or two ago, is that when the first bomb hits a planet, is that where Mike experiences what he calls an orgasm?
Yeah, he describes he's like so greatly satisfied by the fact that all of his rocks hit exactly where he expected them to based on his calculations, that he's like, oh, this is magnificent, this is perfect. It's almost like and the book kind of leads into this with like he decides to join in on their coup from the beginning because Mike just wants to be entertained, basically. Like, and his entertainment is he gets to flex his circuitry. Like, he's basically the equivalent of a computer athlete.
And it builds off like Mike and Man. Like, Man is Mike's first best friend, and then Mike introduces him to other people. So like the coup is like Mike's social life. Like, he doesn't know any other people than the 3 people that know that he's a computer. And so it's like either you talk to us and you participate, or I mean, that's how I took it, was like he's going to participate because that's how he gets to socialize.
Yeah, it's like his like jollies, basically.
I never thought this ever when I was reading. Like, I never expected it. But like, imagine if you get to like the final chapters or so, and it was the entire revolution was Mike's new joke he was trying out. It's like, was this one funny?
Oh well, like it succeeds, and then like he shunts them all out the airlock. Like,
was this a funny? Was it like this is the funny once, right?
Yeah.
yeah. It almost like and it kind of felt like Mike ultimately existed less to explore the concepts behind like what it meant to have like an AI intelligence born from like nothing, and more to just be like, Mike is like a tool to enable the central conceit of the book, which is, what if God was your comrade in the revolution?
That's interesting.
I think that's a good point of view, and I think that's where a lot of people's opinions of the book kind of come from. That like, here's this cool thing that we want to know and learn about because this is a science fiction book, but it's really just an empty vessel for the plot of the book and kind of the political revolution story that wants to be told.
Like,
so it's kind of like
Mike is a vehicle that allows the story to happen the way he wants it to happen, and it's like, the author seems kind of not interested in Mike beyond that point, and like occasionally he gets to say something else, but then not for very long. It's just like right back to the revolution, to the politics, that sort of thing. So
yeah, which I found frustrating.
Oh,
and it kind of went into like my other, like, I liked the book for the most part, aside from like some of the things other people have said. My only other thing was there was a real lack of fleshing out the environment. To the point, I actually think I could have bought the wheat thing a little more easily if I had any mental conception of what a farm on the moon looked like. Like, are they in bubbles?
Are
they all subterranean?
It's a tunnel.
Is it just a giant tunnel complex? Like, well, I to this day do not understand what the interior of their civilization looks like.
I guess on like the other hand, you can like kind of use your imagination, I guess, but I don't know. That feels like kind of a cop-out answer too, right? So
yeah, it always made sense when they were in corridors, because I could visualize that in my head. Like, I just thought of like the interiors of like the Nostromo or whatever. But anytime they talked about something that would require larger space, I had no idea what to visualize.
Right. All right, well, you had some really good points here, Spork. Stick around. You can weigh in again if you want to. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
And while we're getting the next person in, I don't know how much kind of the dynamics around the Cold War played into the fact that like we're talking about wheat and like feeding the earth, because there was a lot of back and forth with like Russia and their like agriculture and the US with their agriculture, and like which system better serves to feed their people. And this might just be like me completely reading into like trying to make things work in the time, but I don't know if that's like the reason he used wheat.
It's kind of hard, like, because this book was written in like 65, 66, right? And it's like looking back, it's like you try to understand the context of what exactly was going on. It's so hard to do that. Like, you're like, okay, Cold War, but like it's probably more than just that, right? Like we can all say Cold War, but what like specifically was it, you know? And there's I think Heinlein was very politically active and very motivated. So it's like, you know, it's kind of hard. It's almost impossible to put your perspective in the author's mindset there. You know what I mean? Like, what exactly was he talking about? What was he inspired by? That sort of thing. India and China were in a war at the time when the book came out. Not sure there's much there. Vietnam was in its civil war. The U.S. hadn't entered yet. Interesting. It's so interesting to think about like exactly when. Metal Gear Solid 3 taught you that. See, it's like, just play Metal Gear Solid 3. You'll understand it all. Yeah. You got it. All right, we got our next person in. Less Than Dan. Hello, Less Than Dan. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. How's it going, Less Than Dan?
Hell yeah, it's going. Hey, so this is the first book I've read in probably 20 years. I am not a reader by any means at all. So I went to this with no frame of reference. I decided to get a Kindle. I was like, yeah, I'll get a Kindle and read a book. That'll be pretty cool.
Wow.
Without knowing how to use the Kindle, so I had no idea how to go back and check the title. So I've been calling this book The Moon That Rises for the last like month or so. So now they know it's called The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Really, really cool. Anyways, I just about finished it. I liked it. I agree with others that it was a bit of a slog in some parts. I actually really enjoyed, there was a lot of comedy gold when they were like starting the revolution kind of in like the second half of the book. Like, I really like the idea of them not knowing like how to fund it. So they're like, where do we get the money from? Where do we get this? Where do we get that? We're like, well, we can rob banks. And they're like, can we? Yeah, I guess we can. So they start doing that, and then they have billions. And then all of a sudden, Professor has billions of dollars that he can start gambling away. Mm-hmm. But like Mike is taking all that money and putting it back in the catapult fund, which I thought was really cool. And that's like Mike's sense of humor, which I really appreciated throughout the book, was Mike's like idea of practical jokes actually being like something that like I would say like, oh yeah, I would love to play a joke like that on my friends. Like that was also like pretty funny and whatnot.
What was it? Well, I think like, doesn't Mike at first say he's like, I can make you however much money you want. Like, you guys want $10 billion? And they're like, no, we can't do that. and then Professor gambles it all away anyways, right?
Well, yeah. So the reading was, so some of the words were a bit difficult. Like I didn't know what half of the stuff was in the first third of the book or so. I didn't know what anything was. I had a hard time with the tense. So I sort of feel like we were in the present, then we were in the past, then we were in the future, and then we were way far in the future at some points, right? Like, you know, Mike or Manny would say, you know, as it turns out, this is what happened, or I didn't know this at the time, but this was this. So I had a hard time really figuring out when I was.
Like just like the way it was written, just it just trip. It's like sometimes you'd have to read stuff over and over because it just trip you up everywhere, like the syntax and stuff.
Yeah, and they don't.
Yeah, I agree. So what helped me, I think, was when I was first getting into it. I was also watching, I think, like one of the Guardians movies, and so I read the whole book as the voice of like Cosmo, the Russian space dog, and I think that really paid off to help me like understand like this, like some of the context of what.
I thought you were gonna say Drax or something.
No, I was gonna say Groot, personally.
No, yeah.
All right. Well, great stuff. Hey, let me ask you one more thing. How was it to read for like the first time in like 20? What did you last read in like high school or something? Well, how was it to read again?
Yeah, my last time was reading high school. I mean, I've just never really been much a reader. I don't really like, I don't find a lot of joy in it, but I'm trying to do that again. I thought this is probably a good way to sort of tackle that. I don't know. I will say that in the context of sci-fi, I'm a bit, so again, non-reader, no context going into this book, right? I'm thinking like Westworld, like that's my frame of reference or something like this when I think of sci-fi. So I'm reading this book and I'm wondering like, you know, when is there like, what's the catch, right? What is the big twist going to happen? When is this going to do this? When is this going to be a giant simulation, or when is Mike going to come alive and murder everybody? Right? Like, when is this going to happen? Yeah. But that never happened. It just sort of went on and on and on. And it progressed exactly the way I thought it was going to. And I don't know if I'm bummed out about that. I don't know if I was like hoping for a little bit more, but at the end of the day, I still enjoyed it either way. And I'm excited to read the next one. So.
Yeah, well, that's great. I'd like to do more for sure. I'd like to do more book clubs. I kind of wanted to see how the response to this one was going to go. I kind of imagine like book club on Twitch, I'm going to have like 18 viewers and like 3 people want to talk about it. But it's been a lot of you actually did read the book, and a lot of you do want to talk about it. So it's actually, I feel like this has been pretty awesome. I feel like this has been pretty awesome so far. Can we do another? I think we can definitely do another. I think we could totally do another. This is amazing, very one of a kind. It's probably not. Has there ever been a book club on Twitch before? I don't know. I don't know if this might be a first on Twitch. I'm not so sure. I don't know. We want to hear about it. So like, okay, so they talk. That's actually a good point, because I've been trying to go through the plot and like give like a kind of crappy synopsis as we go. Like if you didn't, there's synopsis. If you guys didn't read it, you didn't see too much of it. This is amazing on acid. I'm glad you're enjoying. So. They involve Mike in the revolution, and he starts to help them like get money, and he helps plan like the way their resistance is going to be organized and stuff. So that kind of proceeds for a while, and they kind of create these like little cells. They're almost like terrorist cells where they're like kicking up discontent and like recruiting more people and creating these like different groups within there. So after enough time, with enough, like basically Terra or the Earth is aware of like what's going on. So they send a group called the Peace Dragoons, which I thought was pretty fun. Was a pretty funny name for a group of peace. And they're sent to kind of quiet all the people on the moon and make sure everything is fine over there, which I thought was kind of funny. The Peace Dragoon. It sounds like something from Armored Core 6 plot. And that's where the moon.
Hey, it reminded me of Proud Boys, like today.
Oh God, the Peace Dragoons, right? And that's where I think Professor says we need our Boston Tea Party. Like we need our moment to like start the revolution and like officially start it. And that's where things kind of go. That's in Rabble in Arms. I think that's where Rabble in Arms kicks off, and it becomes like a full on revolution at that point. But let's go ahead. Let's get some more people. Hey, thank you so much. I'm glad we were able to get your reading lesson, Dan. I hope it was fun. Maybe the next book will be better.
Yes, thank you, comrades. Good book. Like good book. Good. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you, lesson, Dan.
Some added context for kind of like the setup for the book. Like going to the moon is like a death sentence. Like after you've been there like a month, you can't survive on Earth anymore. So it starts as a penal colony, but it's not like organized like a prison, because once you're there, you're stuck. And so some people immigrate voluntarily, some people are sent. And so it's not set up like a prison, but it is still like a penal colony whether you go there voluntarily or involuntarily, because you can't go back.
Yeah, that's really, I wanted to mention that, and I just kind of slipped my mind. I was going to get around to that, but you're like super correct, and that's really important to bring up. So like the way it sets up, I don't know if Heinlein, I don't know how much was known in the 60s, because like at that point, obviously, like we did have astronauts and that sort of thing. But like, I think essentially, isn't it when we send astronauts up into space for like months or days or months, like doesn't gravity have an effect on like their spines or something, and they're like a little bit taller when they get back?
Yeah.
And like there's like physical effects, right? And I feel like I don't know for sure, right? But I feel like Heinlein saw that, and he was like, well, what happens over years? Like what happens over multiple years? And I feel like this is one of the most interesting things about the book, is that basically when you go to the moon and you're there for like, I think for Heinlein it's just even a couple weeks or like a month or something.
There's ways for to extend it, but you have to, yeah.
But like essentially once you're there, if you go back to Earth, it's like torture. Like you can't stand up, your bones are weak, you're gonna get diseased and sick. Like basically you can, if you return to Earth, like you're essentially like going to die. So what that means is that with these people who are like stuck on the moon for generations and generations, like they can basically never go back to Earth ever. Like they can never go back. Yeah, sorry, the music's a bit loud. So I thought that was actually one of the more interesting ideas of the book. I thought that was really cool. It kind of creates like a huge divide.
If Terra wants to send a peacekeeping force, they're basically damning all of these soldiers to a life on the moon if they're going to stay for more than a month.
Right.
So it creates an interesting tension between what, like the Earth doesn't want to destroy the moon because they depend on it for grain, but they can't like physically occupy it without having, like you have these peace dragoons, which are not like well-ordered peacekeepers, because those people don't want to go live on the moon for the rest of their life. So that is kind of interesting.
Let's see, let's get some more people in. Let's see, we got Antog. Hello, Antog. How are you?
Hi, friends. How are we all doing tonight?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you. Yeah, been enjoyable. Loving everybody's points and everybody's bits of conversation. Been a lot of fun so far. Overall, I really liked the book. I ended up picking up on Audible, and it was like a 2006 reread. And the gentleman that read it just put on all sorts of really good like accents and inflections that helped with, kind of that gap in language that it really created. So that was kind of a cool experience there. That being said, though, one point that hasn't really been touched on that I thought was kind of interesting was really throughout the context of the revolution that they kind of ended up turning into hypocrites and oppressing the Terrans as they came up to Luna as it was anyway, and they weren't any better than they were being treated when the revolution was in its, at its peak. And that could truly be something that, is a product of necessity, because, you're there to win the revolution and earn your freedom.
Right.
But it was one of those things that kind of caught my eye, where it's like, well, they're not treating the people that they saw as their oppressor any differently than they would want to be treated.
Well, that was probably intentional by the author, right? To like show, like, because Prof is kind of the stand-in for all these big political ideas and all these like idealists of what society they could make afterwards. And then in the end, we see like what kind of society the moon actually makes, right? So that was probably intentional, right?
Yeah, I could see that.
And that point really is what bothers me about the end, because Prof and Mike just die. And they never, like, nobody even knows that Mike is involved. And it's like, that would have been, it feels like a lot of build up for no payoff. But.
Prof dies and he's like giving a speech. And he finishes the speech, and then it's like, and then his heart gave up, and he did die.
Well, not only that, like, he just came back from the Earth. They thought he was dead. No, he's fine. Gave a speech. Oh no, now he's dead.
He did almost die a lot. I still imagine the Monty Python. The animator suffered a fatal heart attack. He just like fall back. I kept imagining that. Like he kept trying to kill him too, like over and over and over. Are we going to get graded for this? Yes. Dan is grading you all right now. Yes. He did what he needed to. The body made ready to die. That's true.
Yeah, overall though, good read. Early on, we were talking about how it started off strong, slog in the middle, and then it was buttoned up abruptly. But at the same time, it's like, really the big character that we had that had a primary arc was Mike, right? And I thought it was, honestly, I liked Mike's send-off in the sense that, it could be attributed, as Manny said, to his lost, the parts that were destroyed or taken or whatever, and so he couldn't be himself any longer. But I think it also leaves it up to interpretation in that respect, that, it could be really that Mike maybe had a moral conflict too. And being sentient, he realized what he was capable of and maybe intentionally shut himself off as well with no intent to return.
That would have been that's a really interesting idea. That's probably, I feel like that's more interesting than what actually happened.
Yeah, I felt myself also thinking, well, like, what if it was the deal between the professor, because like he understood the risk that Mike played, and so like, what if they just had like a suicide pact? And but it's like, that's me. That's not the book. Did none of that.
I feel like I like both of your ideas better than what the book actually came up with. I like both of these ideas better, actually. How are the books chosen in book club? We choose the books. It's like a blind choice, and chat votes based on the genre is how we do it. So, I'm sorry, I cut you off. What were you saying?
Oh no, I just wanted to say thanks for letting me flap my gums for a little while.
Oh, not at all. Not at all.
I appreciate your time. I'm ready to step off the stage though.
Oh, you had a plenty of good perspective. So thank you for joining. Appreciate that, Antog.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we got.
It is interesting, like thinking about reading a book from the '60s as opposed to like watching a modern sci-fi show, because like the book ends and it's always meant to end, and there's never going to be a cliffhanger. There's never going to be a twist compared to like modern sci-fi media that has to like live on an infinite potential cycle.
Right, like room for sequels and room for more merchandising, that sort of thing, right? What's up, Archivist Owl? How's it going? Thanks for joining.
Hello.
How are you? Thank you for waiting. You raised your hand a long time ago. I'm sorry, it just got to you.
It's perfectly fine. Don't worry about it. It's kind of late here. It's 3:20-ish.
Oh my god.
But it's fine. Don't worry. My sleeping schedule is already fucked. What I will say though is that I read the book way long ago, like right as we decided upon the book. So and I read it in like a day and a half. So what I'll say is something that I've not heard many people mention is, while getting into the book initially was really hard, like it was difficult to get into that like writing style. Once I got used to it, it is one of the most interesting writings of like patois style languages that I've seen, especially like compared to new age stuff like cyberpunk, where it's like, it's English, but we use Joomb. So it's very interesting to see how that approach was taken. And the other thing that I really liked is the main like standout was Mike's and Man's relationship. Like, even if I disagree with a lot of the way that a lot of things are portrayed in the book, that's a real standout that I really enjoyed. Anything else? I think that for some people, they did expect more of a sci-fi book, but it is very much using science as a vessel for storytelling. Like, you could just put the science to the side and still have the exact same message. And I do find that it's very lacking because of that. Like, it could have very well expanded upon the science a bit more. So when it does draw upon science, it fails a little bit. Like, it is kind of silly to me that you have that level of science, but humanity did not really think about kinetic bombardment and did not prepare for that in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And by all means, I would say that the main problem that I had was the portrayal of women. But again, it is very much a product of its time. I cannot.
You bring up like ideas like what we expected in the year 2024. We go in to read a science fiction book, and what the expectations are for reading a sci-fi book in 1966 compared to 2024. Like, I don't know what our expectations are nowadays compared to what they were back then, but I definitely, going in, I've read books from the 60s, 70s, and even going in, I was like, this wasn't really exactly what I was expecting. You know, I feel like that was kind of the case for a lot of us. Like, we were not quite expecting it to be exactly the way it was too. But I mean, one of the things that I loved about one of the things that I really did actually legitimately really enjoy about the book was, I feel like the science fiction of the 60s, like the ideas in those books are like so much better. Like, their ideas are so interesting compared to a lot of sci-fi we get nowadays, which are more like, I don't know, space opera-y, like action-y. Just they have a lot more ideas that are more interesting than most science fiction nowadays. And I feel like that was probably one of my favorite things about the book. Now, a lot of the other stuff was definitely not nearly as strong, but it kind of reminds me of Philip K. Dick a little bit, where it's like all these ideas. The ideas are the main characters. It's not, don't worry about the characters. It's the idea is the character here. And in some cases, that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I very much agree. It's just that for example, the way that AI is portrayed is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I did not like how like savior-ish the AI was, almost like Deus Ex Machina-ish, because they taking it at face value, if it wasn't for Mike, there would have been absolutely no chance that they would have done anything.
Right.
So I wish there was a little bit more about the people too. But again, Mike was, for me, the protagonist. Even though Man was also very well written.
Right.
And Wire was just such a missed opportunity to actually go further into the good things about women in the society. But yeah, like, especially some of the descriptions of women were very much like, it was needlessly mean and needlessly like creepy.
Yeah, there were a couple of creepy lines in there, weren't there?
Yeah.
More than a couple.
I think it was when Man's child wife dies, and it's like a bullet hit her between her little girl breasts, and it's like, why?
Yeah.
Why would you say that? But yeah,
it was lovely. Was also in there.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, it was weird. It can get creepy at times.
Sure.
But again, at the end of the day, good book. Very much libertarian propaganda. But if you take it at face value as that, it's great.
But before you go, chat wanted to know if you could narrate and read the next book to them, because I think they all fell in love with your voice.
Oh, thanks, chat. I really appreciate it. Don't worry, I am going to read the next book, and I will be back to discuss.
We hope you'll be here every time, Archivist Owl. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's see. So where were we in the plot? Hang on, I'm scrolling through looking for the next hands raised. I know after his voice, my voice sounds like I probably sound like Fran Drescher by comparison. Hey guys, Mr. Sheffield. Let's see, I'm looking for more hands raised. Oh, here we go. Okay, I see my hands raised now. So let's see, where do we leave off? Fran Drescher is good, what you mean? All right, so we left off, and like the revolution had just kind of begun, and they kill the Peace Dragoons, and then on July 4th, they like officially declare their independence. Like, officially, we are independent on the moon, the free state of Luna, blah, blah, blah. And then after a little while, they decide that Proth and Man need to be, they need to go to Earth to like basically plead their case to Earth. and like try to convince people on Earth that like, hey, let us be free. We can be better. Like we can actually like make a deal here. We don't have to have a civil war, that sort of thing. So they end up, the moon doesn't have any ships. So what they have to do is they basically fling Man and Prof down in like a shipment of wheat. So they basically crash down. This is also the first time Professor dies. And I don't know about you, Dan, but I like totally thought like, oh, Professor's dead.
It was kind of like a tease because they did talk about like why Manny's also going and that like he's not as qualified and like all of these things, and it's like the Prof's gonna live. Like don't tell me that if there was like there's stakes, but then never mind, everything's fine.
But they land and it's like, oh, his heart exploded, and it's like,
yeah,
oh, there's no way he lived. It's like, oh well. And then like when Man wakes up, it's like, no, actually he's all right. He's fine. It's like it was almost like a retcon, like chapter later. It's like, nah, he's fine actually. The Prof is okay.
Well, and at this point in the novel, they have like a conspirator on Earth that Man had met on the moon.
Right.
And there's even a discussion that like the conspirators like, I wanted to send a ship to come pick y'all up, but Prof was like, no, we need like the optics and stuff, and like that would have been a perfect place for Prof to have died because he was so dedicated to like things manipulating the scene to be as perfect as possible.
Right. All right, let's see. Let's get somebody in. We got Terracotta. How's it going, Terracotta? There we go. Hey, Terracotta. How's it going?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. What's up, dude?
Awesome. Sorry, I just took a big bite of chocolate.
That's okay.
I feel like everybody's kind of touched on this in various ways. You and Dan immediately before I joined. To me, the book felt pretty boring in the sense that there was never any consequences for their actions, right? Everything seemed pretty easy for them. At the very beginning of the book, when the party gets broken up, somebody gets their leg chopped off, they basically dissolve the bodies. I'm thinking, oh man, this is going to be a pretty gruesome book. And then nothing really happened after that, right? If the professor had died going down to Earth, like what an adversity Man would have had to overcome to try to convince people of Earth, like, hey, we're a sovereign nation. That doesn't happen. The closest thing to a consequence, I guess, is his wife, Ludmila, who, a character that we heard about 140 pages in the past, just kind of died.
Like, oh yeah, she existed,
would
right?
Right. Not a lot of significance, I guess, to the characters or the story or the world. And I understand that it's really meant to be a vessel for his ideas, libertarianism. Right. But for me, I like feeling when I read a book or consume media. And if there's some consequences, they find out where Man lives and they bomb his tunnel and kill his family. Like, yeah, that would have sucked, but that would have made the book a little bit more exciting and have a little bit higher stakes.
I think most people like to have some kind of like investment in the story or the books or the character or something. So I don't think you're the only one that would like, want to root for the characters or like, I don't know, something, right? Some like meat there, like red meat that we want to have while we read the book, right? So.
Yeah, and like I completely agree because like lots of people die, plenty of things get destroyed, but there's never like, aside from Mike dying at the end, there's never like an important enough character that's had a role in the book that suffers a consequence.
It's like usually like you'd root for like in a story like this, like the moon is obviously the underdog here. And I can't say I really rooted for the people. Like I'm not cheering for the people on the moon because like essentially Mike makes everything happen exactly the way it's supposed to be. So like they very rarely face any difficulties or challenge, right?
Yeah,
very much.
I mean, can you imagine, like, maybe this is me projecting what I think sci-fi should be. Imagine if Wyo had died, right? And Mike finds a way to download her consciousness so they can still interact with her, right? And she's kind of on Mike's side and level of intelligence. Like, that brings a little bit more depth, I think, to the story and to the characters and what they're trying to fight for. If they lose somebody close to them and they feel like they have to continue to see it through, right, for their sake.
You know something? I don't know if you guys, if you either of you remember this, but like at one point, I think it's like early on in the chapter, and they mention it later. They mention how Mike is actually not the smartest computer like that humans have made.
Yeah.
there's like another there's another computer on the Earth that's like part cyborg or something.
Yeah, it's the Chinese computer. They talk about it a couple times because, like, at some point in time, whenever they're discussing or like interfacing with the Chinese representative, like they like mention it, but like they won't recognize. And yeah.
So I always thought like that would enter the plot somehow. Like, okay, well, yeah, Mike is this really smart computer, but Earth has a smarter computer now. And I thought like maybe something would happen with that, but like, no, nothing ever happens with that. It's like they just mention it and it never, like literally nothing ever comes of that at all. It's like
there's no adversity in the whole book other than this idea of a revolution.
Yeah, pretty much, right? The book is full of things hinted at and never paying off. Yeah, I kind of agree with that, Mexican. I kind of agree with that. It's kind of true. Well, thank you so much, Terracotta. Let's get somebody else on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yo, thank you. Bob the Builder. Bob the Builder, let's try to send you there.
Sure thing.
What's up, Bob the Builder? How are you?
Pretty good, thanks, Barb. How are you?
Doing good. Got coffee. I'm hanging in there.
I'm excited for potential Barbarous Book Club merchandise. I think that would be really interesting.
Maybe like my face and BBC beneath it or so. I don't know. Probably not.
Would rock it in my library. Everything that I mean, it's been a really interesting experience talking about this with everyone. You have some really smart viewers and everyone has interesting perspectives, which is great. I thought it was interesting how Manny was left in the dark a lot of the time during the revolution. And a lot of these things are just kind of happening to him. He's a reluctant leader of a rebellion that he really had no interest in being a part of.
Yeah, he kind of gets talked into it because like in the initial meeting, so the initial meeting where they decide on the revolution, it's Wyo, Prof, and Man is there. He's like the maintenance guy who works on Mike. And he's just like, the way he describes it, he's like, I figured out how to game the system. I can beat authority. Like I got free water and free food. Like I'm good. And he just kind of gets brought along, like, I don't want to say unwillingly, but he kind of gets conscripted into it against his will almost. And he's like, whatever, I guess.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And like he does have a conscience about the whole thing. When he realized that Mike has rigged the election to make it all of the cronies of the revolution, he feels really uncomfortable with that. And he says, I'm going to take this up with Mike. And that conversation just is never brought up and never explored further.
He's kind of in the dark when when he goes to Earth with Professor, he thinks they're going there to like avert the Civil War and like stop it from happening. But like he doesn't know that that's like not even why they're there, right? Like Man doesn't even know that.
Well, as soon as Prof, the way it's kind of after they've been to Earth and they come back, the way the Prof describes it is like, as soon as I, the professor, knew they were going to offer us a deal that people on the moon would probably accept, I knew we had to make sure that they didn't actually give us that deal. Because, we need a war, we need to fight, people need to die, which, I mean, is understandable in the sense that, it's not freedom unless we're all free kind of thing, but it's also very much like this, you just lied to Man the whole time and he had no idea. So
what did you both think of when Man first meets the representatives of Earth? There's like he meets like the Chinese ambassadors and like the North American ambassador. What did you guys think of their first meeting, like Prof and Man, when they met them?
A lot of that part of the Earth scenes just kind of like run together for me. I think it was a better part of the book, like them kind of interacting within the adversity of like being on the Earth and what that meant for them, and there actually being like a little more nuance in the political system on Earth, and there being like other players that like want to talk to them but can't talk to them in public, and then also Man's perspective of like all of these strange foreign aliens.
Yeah, that's Mr. Anderson. That's what I was thinking. So like the North America, like you'd think like, oh, well, is like the American guy going to be like a good guy or something? No, the North American representative is like the biggest asshole. He's like the gigantic douchebag.
Yeah, like the congressperson from Colorado is just, and they even like describe him as having like ulterior motives because he's like running for a higher office or something, and he's like using this as a platform.
And I think, is it when so Prof and Man go to North America, they're in North America, I think, and they do an interview, and they I think one of the news reporters asks Man about his family, and Man's like, well, I've got like, I forget his family's like
Kentucky.
huge. Oh, it's in Kentucky, is that where it is?
Yeah, that's the Kentucky call out. Yeah, so like he goes to Kentucky, and like Prof has set him up to tell these reporters in Kentucky about his line marriage, which is like a polygamous family system. And then the reporters go to the cops, and the District of Kentucky arrests him for like enticing people to commit, polygamy and other lewd acts. And they have to like go to the UN to get him like extradited and removed from prison. And like when you're reading it, you're thinking that like, oh man, the author thinks that Kentucky is this backwater place even in 2027, which it is. And then you learn that it's also all just a setup to be an op.
Yeah. So Man, not only did he not know why he was originally why he's even going to Earth at all, he doesn't even know that he's going to be arrested. He's like all set up. So he's kind of a patsy for a lot of the plot, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's just kind of along for the ride.
He just made the introduction to Mike, and they ran with it, and they had the trump card to see it through to the end.
He's a useful idiot.
I thought it was
maybe.
Basically. I also thought it was interesting, so I was concerned if they did win, what happens with Mike? Like, what happens if he turns into an antagonist, which just never happened. But I thought it was interesting looking at it from the warden's perspective, because he thought he had the supercomputer that was on his side, whereas really all of his protected communications were subject to being investigated and code being broken by a super AI.
All right, well, thank you, Bob the Builder. I really appreciate you jumping on. Thank you for your perspectives.
Thank you.
All right, let's get Moby Doo. Let's get Moby Doo in here. Moby Doo, can you hear us?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. What's up, Moby Doo?
Hey, what's up? So my topic that I wanted to bring up was along the part of the allegories of the American Revolution, which included that the moon basically has the high ground. And if you go back to the American Revolution, it is easier to sail back to England than it is to get people from England to the States. So we have the high ground, we have the food, we have resources. We just don't have an army that can fight on Earth. And I find it pretty incredible that it is almost all the way the revolution to a T, everything that they're doing, with the exception of how everything came to an end, with the absolute bombardment of Terra.
That was definitely something Heinlein had in mind, because like the Luna literally declares independence on July 4th, right? So like Heinlein definitely had that. Like that's probably like his model, right, for like designing it. Is that what you guys think?
I would agree. Yeah.
It was. Yeah. Well, it wasn't too subtle there, was it?
Yeah. But the one thing that I find funny about it, though, is if you go into like the little details in the story, he mentions, okay, I won a Boston Tea Party. Okay, we visited Boston, and quote, after I seeing it, I suspected they hanged the wrong witches. And then following up later in the bombardment, they said, why don't we send one into Boston Harbor as well? So I thought it was hilarious that they were like, yeah, we want this tea party, and like, this is our motivation. And then they were like, actually, forget Boston. It can go into the ocean.
Yeah, like it's almost kind of like, I guess you'd think like it's kind of necessary for the revolution to happen, right? For Luna. It's almost kind of, I find it almost kind of cold the way it's all run. It's like they create these conditions where they want the conflict and they want these horrible things to happen. Like they want the Peace Dragoons to incite people. Like there's something kind of cold as they're like trying to incite these things to happen so things will go the way they want. And they're like, there's something kind of coldly analytical about all that. And
I don't know how much of that is like the author trying to make you think that way. Like is he being critical of what's happening in the book by writing it that way and saying like, you know, because even like a lot of the political stuff that happens, it's like, well, it's not actually going to be like this great thing where everybody agrees and we get exactly what we want. And you can't actually achieve it without stooping to the level of, you know, your opponent. But I don't know. I didn't really get that was like, it wasn't as obvious that's like, I want you to think about the consequences of your necessary actions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like, I don't know if I don't know if Heinlein does he want us to root for the moon? I guess this is kind of a dumb question, but he wants us to root for the people like the moon revolution, right? He wants us to root for them. Is that a stupid question? He wants us to root for them, right?
I could not root for the people on the moon. I could not do it.
The people on the moon are like bystanders to like two different authoritarian regimes. That's how I read it. Because like man is like a stand-in for everybody on Luna because he's just kind of like along for the ride. And then the professor is basically getting to live out his power fantasy and overthrowing the dictatorial state so that he can have some place to then like experiment with his utopia where he's a radical anarchist.
That almost makes Prof
rational
seem like
anarchist.
a really evil guy, like an
Well,
antagonist.
no, I kind of see him like that because like even when like the politicians are sitting down like writing their constitution, like he comes into the meeting and he's like, I don't know, that all kind of sounds bad. Do we even need a and he's like, he's saying these things to personally slow them down and turn them around and get them to like, I don't know, like I don't see Prof as like this is the leader of the revolution good guy, you know?
Well, in some ways it's so the revolution, like Prof and Man and Yo, they all know like what's the thing going on behind the scenes is that the moon is being drained of its lifeblood, right? So they know what's happening because we'll just assume that whatever Mike is saying is right because Mike is right about everything all the time. So they know what's going on behind the scenes, right? But in essence, like the Mike and the conspirators, they're manipulating the events on Earth, but they're also manipulating everybody on the moon too. Like they don't really have a say, and they're all puppets, right? Everybody is a puppet dancing to Mike's tune, and it's going the way they think it should go. So really, everybody is being controlled, right?
Yeah, and I mean it's in their quote unquote best interest, and I think that the author does a good job of describing why that's so. But to me, a lot of the conflict in the book was like, is this worth it? Was this justifiable? And like the ending kind of just let me down because like those questions didn't even get asked because the Prof and Mike died, and maybe I was reading too much into those being like a key conflict in the book. But.
Man has conflict with those decisions, right? So like next in the plot, so they're on the Earth, and Man, like they get freed out of jail and they're still going around. I think this is when Man meets with this was kind of interesting, where Man meets with the Chinese leaders, like a Chinese ambassador, and they start meeting with everybody on the planet, and they start trying to pitch this idea of building catapults on Earth that can, so like just like the moon has catapults, they want to build catapults on Earth that are like really high up on mountains, so they can basically fling resources back and forward. And the higher up a catapult is on Earth, like the less resistance whatever it throws up to the moon would have, so it costs less fuel or whatever, right? And so they pitch it to like every country on the planet, like China, they go to Chile, they go to America, like they literally pitch it to everybody. And the ultimate goal of all that is to like sow dissension and like divide the planet, the countries of Earth. That way, like they're not all united against the moon at that point. So that's like the actual motive of them going to Earth, not actually to like stop the Civil War. Like in their view, the Civil War is like absolutely going to happen, right?
Oh yeah, it's necessary. Like we've got to be in an armed conflict.
Mm-hmm. They were planting the seed for a reason to stop the war. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's funny that they went to Chile as they had a lot of power. I think they were just trying to get anybody in the planets of the countries of Earth to break ranks, because if they're all united, that's a problem, right?
So, and part of them going to Earth, the conspirator on Earth got the nation of Chad to recognize them as like diplomatic citizens.
That's right.
So they're even going to like Chad, being like, "Hey, like your hill over here, like we could definitely put a catapult there."
Right. I totally forgot about that. So for them to like not get immediately arrested or whatever, they had to become citizens of like somewhere. And so I think Mike and them, they try to bribe everybody, and the only people they can bribe is the country of Chad. That's like, so they're all the citizens of the moon are the only citizens that they become citizens of Chad, I guess, or at least Prof and Man do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they bribe Chad. That's right. Well, thank you, Moby Dew. Let's get somebody else in.
Beach mouse.
Get the hell out of here, Moby Dew. He was just waiting for that. Let's see. We got somebody else in. Hello to Sluid Foe. How's it going, Sluid Foe?
Howdy.
How are you? Good evening.
Nice and cold here in Texas.
It's kind of chilly here in North Carolina too. The weather's dropping. I got my window open though. It's nice.
Yeah, so overall I like the book. I think that I like chapter 2 more than most people, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it kind of gives some insight into Heinlein's, like why he feels libertarianism is ideal. And there's some, interesting parallels in the just, out of touchness and not working of democracy, and throughout all time and the present day. But I feel like what we're really dancing around is, in the Discord, a lot of people had been talking about, well, Prof is a stand-in for Heinlein, and Heinlein is an ultra-libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just this, there's this discordance between being a libertarian and making an ultra-fascist. Because, like, at the end of the revolution, Mike is, giving orders as Manny. He's doing things autonomously. He has control of all the communications. It's a surveillance state. And yeah, there's just the juxtaposition of those ideas. Like, is he really just trying to achieve libertarianism for everyone, or what? And then Mike just dies, so it's not a problem.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It's so weird to think about. Like, so I read Heinlein's Wikipedia, and I guess like he also changed his because I think we're talking about the book. We have to talk about his like politics, right? And I guess Heinlein's political ideas changed from like the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. And I guess that's probably like World War II, and like a lot of people's political ideas were changing all of a sudden, I guess, at that point. And maybe I didn't read closely enough, or maybe I glossed over a lot of it. But like, so I know a lot of people were saying that this is like it's like libertarianism. This is like one of the libertarian founding documents here, but like, what exactly is he like? What is he holding up some viewpoint that like this is the best viewpoint in the book, like, or this political ideology is like the winner or something? Is that the sense you guys got?
I think the way and the lengths that he goes to describe Manny and his family is like, that's where I read it. Like, to me, Prof is like a self-described rational anarchist who doesn't think there needs to be laws, but then recognizes that other people want laws, so he thinks that laws should exist to like bring those people into the fold. And that's just like very, very shallow, like, yeah, okay, like, sure. And I read more of like, and maybe this is me thinking more of like classic modern day libertarians, whereas like Manny's family lives and survives and kind of steals a little bit and benefits from government, but like is pretty self-sustaining, and they're like the morally upright citizens, and they have like a long family tradition, and they kind of live within themselves. And like that's kind of where I see that, but I also don't read I didn't read this as like somebody trying to convince me that their political viewpoint is superior.
Yeah, well, like I guess some
no.
people think that like Prof was a Heinlein stand-in, right? Like for like giving his own political ideas of like libertarianism or something. And I mean, like, depending on how you read it, like, so essentially, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but the revolution does not live up to Prof's ideas of like what government should be. And like essentially the revolution falls short of all that, right? Like basically the society that they create on the moon is not what he wanted it. And then he dies. So is he like a tragic hero whose ideas were never truly realized, or is he like a fool who like he shouldn't have expected, like he should have known what was going to happen? Like, how do we look at that in the end? I don't know.
If Prof is the Heinlein stand-in, it seems pretty self-critical to like, here's this like self-described revolutionary that up until now has never actually participated in a revolution that would gamble away all his money without the help of a supercomputer. Like that is Prof. Like he's got all the great ideas and he sets this thing into motion, but and he understands the situation on the moon and the need for self-reliance, but I don't know.
Right. Yeah, and like you're saying, if you continue with the hypothesis that he's the stand-in for Heinlein, and we're discussing Prof as a quasi-villain, like is he self-critical or is he just entirely missing his own point? I would give him the credit and say that he's being self-critical, but I don't know.
I mean, you can definitely like, you can have ideas. Like there's plenty of people who have ideas about the way the government like should be or could be, like what its potential is, but like they realize that in reality it would never be that way. I think there was a couple lines in there where Heinlein's like, yeah, but humans aren't like that, and human nature is never going to be like that. So maybe I feel like that kind of puts me in the direction that actually is that is his stand-in, and he has all these ideas, but he also recognizes that they probably will they're never gonna, it's not practical to never actually work out, right? So
well, it's also like that's why you write, well, not you, like it would make sense that you write a science fiction novel about the moon and not like a serious political, persuasive piece. That it's like, yeah, I mean, I wanna talk about these things and discuss my beliefs, but not in a sense that like people are gonna take it as like go out and do this thing. Though I do think he wrote something in like 2019 that was like how to be your own government or something. I don't know.
When did Heinlein pass away? I have no idea. Or is he alive? He can't be alive, right?
Is he in this Discord call?
Okay. And I was like, wait, there's no way, right? In the 80s. Okay. He's here. He's in the room with us.
But I know he did write like serious like political stuff later in life.
Yeah, I read a review of The Moon is a Harsh Mistress from like way back in the day, like the 60s or 70s. I think it was on Wikipedia or something. And it said that like at the time science fiction was kind of looked down upon as like this like crappy genre with, like lasers and little green men and stuff. And Heinlein's work was actually looked at pulp, exactly. And I think this book was looked at like, oh wow, I think one of the words was like he escaped the ghetto of science fiction pulp, and he brought in these like political views and stuff, and like he was basically able to break science fiction out of that mold it had been in and have like these like larger themes and stuff. So I mean, in that sense, you kind of view it as kind of an important step forward for science fiction, like being able to like, cause to me, in my view, science fiction, I think this is kind of like a lot of us probably agree that science fiction can be about anything. It can be about like politics, like characters, anything at all. But back in the day, science fiction was this like, it's like almost like the way comic books were looked at, where comic books were like, oh, it's just comic books, right? But then you have graphic novels like like Mouse or Watchmen that can like push it way farther than it could have been before, right? So in that sense, like, maybe it was a really important book for just the science fiction genre in general, right? Just so that it was able to prove that science fiction could be more than just that. But I guess nowadays, to me, it's like, oh, well, obviously, but back in the day, maybe it was not, So. Alrighty.
Thanks, Dan.
Oh, no, thanks for jumping in, man. Let's see, we got somebody else here. Let's see. How's it going, SS Penetration? How's it going? Penetration, are you there with us? What a name, the Penetrator. Do we have any penetration? Okay, well, maybe maybe he's busy with something. We don't want to interrupt. We don't want to interrupt him. Let's invite somebody else.
For everybody in chat, his user picture is like a pizza in front of an old TV and like an Xbox controller.
Something like that. How's it going, Duke of Stash? How are you?
Hey, Barb. Long time, first time.
Hey, how's it going, dude?
I wanted to touch on just a couple of things. One thing about the audiobook. I love books. I love science fiction. And I picked up this book very excited from the library to read. And immediately was like, how the hell am I going to read this thing? So I immediately went on to I guess it's Libby or whatever the library website is to try to find the audiobook, and saw that I was going to have like a 3-month wait to get for it. So I did end up purchasing it through Audible, and the Lloyd James narration of this book, aside from the YO character, I thought was a little bit of an interesting interpretation to do a female voice, was just the way to do it. I listened to this while I was working. I work with my hands, so I've kind of always got my AirPods in.
Sure.
It was honestly just a very well narrated audiobook. And as much as we've talked about the shortcomings of the book in a lot of different fashions, and I mean, many people have touched on a lot of things I wanted to talk about beforehand, so I won't get into many of that. But I really thought, and I think I was talking to somebody in Discord about this maybe a day or two ago. I finished the last 2 hours of the audiobook this morning. Is like, do you think Manny is really in like the right place at the right time? I know we talked about him kind of being a puppet, but also at the same time, do you think, just as a question for you, do you think that this revolution would even have sniffed a chance of being probable if it wasn't for the fact that Manny had brought Mike into the fold? It just seemed to me so much that these two characters brought in, aside from when they're at Earth, and they're almost, I mean, quite literally on rails, because, one is in a wheelchair and one is being wheeled around in a bed for the entire time that they're on Earth, that this wouldn't have been possible to achieve ever so slightly if it wasn't for Mike, and by proxy, Manny bringing Mike in. And yeah, I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
All right, Dan, you first.
Yeah, I definitely think, like, it would be overstated to say that Man is just like a puppet along for the ride. I don't know that the book does the best job of like filling out his character motivation. And somebody in chat said that Manny is a patriot first and foremost. And I definitely think that's like the right interpretation, that like Manny is the epitome of, he's not a prisoner. He never was a prisoner. He's on the moon because of his family and his lineage, and he has like a life there and a family there, and he's just like a citizen of the moon, and it's the only home that he's ever known. And so I think in that sense, it's just, he's an integral part and kind of a stand-in for kind of everybody else on the moon that's just along for the ride, and that he's used in a way that like Mike is able to like take advantage of him and like speak on his behalf, and not take advantage in like a pejorative sense, but like he kind of gets used and is the simpleton in some sense, but then that's also the role that he wants. Like, he doesn't want to be a person in government. He wants to be out there, like, shooting the people invading. And so second to Mike, I find him the most interesting character in the book, which is probably good because he's like the person telling the story. But I would agree that he is like an integral part in the plot, and he is the only reason that like Mike even works. Like, if somebody else had discovered Mike for the first time, it wouldn't have been like, oh yeah, let's have a revolution. Like, if Prof had discovered Mike, I don't think things would have been the same. I think Manny is like definitely written as an integral part there, and like, and even the fact that he's working on Mike. This is like really, really early on in the book that like he doesn't work for the authority that runs the moon. He's just the person that is able to fix Mike as an independent contractor. So like, even that relationship is established really, really early on, that like him and Mike, they're bros, and he's got the special sauce to get Mike to work.
Does it make that the point, though, that like Heinlein's trying to make it an interesting story as Manny is in the right place or at the right time? Or maybe is it something deeper to be said that like maybe Mike kind of guided its will to find somebody like Man to be able to succeed in this endeavor?
I kind of feel like Mike's entire existence is like an accident, like the fact that he even exists at all, and Man just happened to be the person working on him at the time, and they kind of developed this like, this early working relationship, and that's just kind of how it happens, sort of accidentally. Now, when I think it probably is because Man and Mike are so close, and like Man is like the first it's the only person Mike knew for how long, right? He's the only not stupid, that because his relationship with Man is what it was, that's why, like, I think when Mike first calculates their odds of being 1 in 7 that they win against the planet, doesn't he like immediately assume that that's with his help? So like, I think you asked earlier, like, would they have had any chance without Mike of succeeding? And I think the answer is very obviously no, that without Mike, the revolution does not succeed. They have no chance. It's impossible. I mean, to me, when I saw Wyo and Prof, this is before they even meet Mike, and Wyo and Prof are back and forward talking about their like political ideas. Like, they would just bicker all night and nothing would ever get done, because like they're just going to talk about their political differences, and like they're not actually going to form a revolution. They're just going to argue all the time. Like, Mike is the driving force that like actually makes things happen. Like, they create the cells, they create the communication. Like, none of that would have happened. And this goes to what somebody else was saying earlier, that in that case, Mike is kind of a plot device, that without Mike exists to make sure things happen the way they're supposed to for the plot to happen. And what the kind of the sad part about it is that I feel like I'm more interested in Mike as a character and his existence and like what he's thinking and like his development. I'm more interested in Mike than I am necessarily in the politics, especially when it's pretty clear that pretty much everything is going the way they plan it to. Like, there's no curveball, nothing goes like horribly wrong. Like, everything pretty much goes exactly the way the revolution is supposed to happen, pretty much, right? Like, there's not really like, oh, well, we did not expect that, things just went terribly wrong. And like, pretty much everything goes by the book from that point on, right?
Well, and that makes me think back to like the very beginning of the book, when Mike and Man are like becoming acquainted, and they address the situation of the joke and overpaying the janitor. And I can't remember if it was Man that calls Mike his friend or Mike that calls Man his friend, but there's the line that's like, you're Mike's only friend. And like, it's a very like close relationship. Yeah. And like, it's like Man is like this gate to even introduce the next person to Mike. So now that Mike has a second friend,
it's almost like sad, right? Like,
it's very,
like Mike exists, he's this new life form, and the first thing they do, it's like organize this revolution, and all right, let's get to war immediately. And
there's even like they even go into like, as like Wyo is learning who Mike is, Mike then establishes a female persona and is now Michelle with Wyo, and that just kind of like that's not important at all to the plot or to Mike. It's important to Mike and the character there, but it's inconsequential overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that makes sense. I mean, Mike can be anything they want him to be. I mean, they establish him as Adam Selene. I mean, they establish him as their leader, and with the thought process that eventually he's going to give up power, and what better way for him to give up power is for him to die as a martyr in Terra's attack on the moon.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that like early on showing Mike as Michelle is probably setting up the frame of reference for Mike to be anything. I think it's a point. I really didn't connect those dots.
So yeah, so after back to the plot, after they like complete their mission on Earth, they basically sneak back up into space. This is Prof and Man. They sneak back up into space and they fly back to the moon essentially. And this is where like the war is like officially begun. Like the war has begun. I think before they go, the thing that really ticks off the war is that they offer Man a position as the new warden over the moon. Like they basically offer him like, you can be in control of the moon, like you can change little things or whatever. We just need you to get everything back in line. And I think like that offer is what like officially ticks off all of, like the people on the moon. Like it's basically they try to buy him off. Yeah. And that's what officially starts like the war. I think is it the invasion happens first, where the
invasion happens first before they start throwing rocks.
Right. So Earth sends it's like 2,000 or 3,000 ground troops in spaceships to go try to take over the moon and like get everybody quiet and stop the war and all that stuff and kill whoever they need to kill. So these like crack ground troops land on the moon. And I thought this was kind of cool. Like, this is where I was like, you know what? I kind of believe this is neat. I was kind of into this point. The ground troops basically like they don't know how to fight in low gravity, and they're not used to fighting. Essentially, it's like a totally different thing that the loonies are much more used to it. So they take heavy casualties, but basically the loonies are able to fight back and like stop the first invasion. Like they kill.
This was
all
a
the
really
ground
good
troops.
point. Yeah, the description of the battles and the combat and the attempted evasion. This was a really, really strong point in the book, because like it was so easy to visualize like somebody who's never been in 1/6 Earth gravity trying to walk down a ramp while assaulting people and like tripping and falling and like this was a really strong.
Yeah, it was pretty
point.
visceral too, because they have like they describe like the las guns, which are like lasers, like slicing people up, and they say they have kids with knives are running at them and stuff. It's like it's very visceral. I feel like that's probably the part where I was like, yeah, okay, I'm kind of cheering for the loonies. I'm kind of cheering for the loonies on this one. I want them to win this one.
It took me a while.
Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Like very early in the very first meeting that got broke up, there was a part where like a kid is described as like rolling in a ball and launching at a person, and it wasn't until the invasion scene that I'm like, oh yeah, it's like super low G gravity, so they can be like super acrobats if they're used to it. And so that was cool. I enjoyed that description of like the invasion, and I thought that was like it all like the world building, like the limited world building such as it was, like really paid that off, because it's like, yeah, the loonies can't go to Earth, but if you put an Earthling on Luna like right away, they can't walk, they can't fight, they can't do much. So yeah, the kid had a screw attack. Exactly.
I like that they said that the invaders were carrying like rocket bullet machine guns and bayonets.
Right.
Like, it seems like the worst two things you could give somebody who doesn't know how to stand properly or walk properly.
Yeah, I think that's like the first time the loonies had seen like regular guns, I guess.
Yeah.
It was like the first time they had never seen regular guns at that point. Kids flying at you in low gravity sounds scary. It kind of does.
Doesn't Highland describe them as just like the kids are skipping down the ramp as like a controlled fall?
Yeah, something like that, right?
Anyway, thank you, Barb. I really appreciate you guys letting me on.
Oh, not at all. Please, anytime.
Have a good evening.
Are we joined now by SS Penetration? Are you here with us?
Hi, hello. Can you hear me now?
Hey, how's it going, Penetration?
Hey, doing all right. How are you?
Doing good, doing good.
All right. So first, thanks for hosting this. It's been interesting so far hearing everyone else's thoughts about the book, especially the positives, because I overall had a pretty negative opinion of the book. Um, what you were talking about before, the kind of agency that man had with Mike, uh, that tension that was there got resolved pretty quickly, in my opinion. Once you figure out about the third of the way through the book, once the revolution really starts, that, well, Mike is this demigod and Manny just happens to be this ultimate aloof, rational actor who is always there to move things forward and grease the wheels of the revolution. It's a foregone conclusion, and that kind of resolved the tension for me. So from there, the prose was just more functional at that point than stylistic. So I was left to kind of deal with how did I feel about the other concepts in the book, which were the political side of things and the technological side of things. And I do really like the technology that was introduced in the book. The AI concepts I thought were very interesting and handled pretty well. Especially the interconnectedness. The only reason this got so big is because they kept adding things on and centralizing everything and giving things so much control. It's interesting to think about like smart devices in our homes nowadays and all the Internet of Things and stuff like that. And but they could have, I agree with everyone else, I think really gone more into Mike, because I thought that was very interesting. And the other technological things as well were really neat, and I wish they had spent a lot more time on that, because the political side of things, it just runs completely orthogonal to my own views. So there wasn't really anything I could take away there. It's all pretty standard libertarian stuff you've read before. So yeah,
What was the point of them saying like so Mike says that, well, you guys have a 1 in 7 chance of winning. Like, what was even the point of that? Because like nothing bad ever happens. So it's actually like, I mean, I guess the tension of the book would be like gone if he says, well, you guys have 100% chance of winning, right? But like,
I mean, at some point, it's like there's 1 in 100 chance now, but we need it. We need this was literally in the book. It's like, we need the odds to get worse. They're going to get worse until they get better. And it was almost just kind of like removing any tension that could have been there. Because like reassuring man, it's like, no, it's fine. And then they just stop telling him the odds.
It's just like a lie, isn't it? It's just like the writer, the author lying to his audience to create like fake tension there. It's like, oh man, they only have a 1 in 7 chance of winning, but it's like, well, that was a fucking lie, wasn't it?
After listening to some other people talk, I almost wish that we would have found out that was a joke. That like the odds were originally like 1 in 1,000, and that was Manny's idea, or that was Mike's idea of a joke. But
yeah, and that was something else too. I saw in Discord a lot of people were talking about how they thought this whole thing was building up to some big joke, and that was kind of a payoff I really wish would have happened one way or the other, like instead of just fizzling out like that.
Right. Well, I mean, that would have been the Shyamalanian twist, right? It's like the whole revolution was a joke. Is that funny? Probably a good thing he didn't go with that. It's probably a good thing in the end. But
there's for anybody that didn't read the book, there's like a through line where Man is teaching Mike that like some jokes are funny once and some jokes are always funny.
And some jokes are never funny.
Some jokes are never funny. And so that would have definitely been a funny once.
Well, hey, thank you, Penetration. Glad we were finally get you in.
All right, thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Let's see. Let's get Addy in here. Hello, Addy. Can you hear us?
Hey, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hey, Addy. How's it going, dude?
Good. First time, long time. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, of course.
So slight digression, but I feel like everyone kind of already covered everything else that I wanted to say about the plot. But what I thought was interesting is like when you read these old sci-fi books and like how... Sorry, got a little nervous when I got on stage.
Oh no, it's all good.
How like how like they predict what technology is going to look like, right? And what they get right and wrong. And it's kind of funny, they predict these massive rail guns and a AI system, but then they still have like phone lines.
right.
And that's a major plot point. Like, we're out of touch. We don't have a phone line.
Yeah, they also predict
I just
like wheat on the moon, right? Like someday, you know, like I don't know that much about space, but I'm pretty sure we're not going to be growing wheat on the moon anytime soon. I don't think that's plausible at all, but it is interesting the way these books, like sometimes either like Star Trek or science fiction novels, get like some things like, wow, so right, and like other things were like, my God, that could not be any farther from the truth.
Yeah, that is something I really enjoy about the book, and not to like retread steps we've already taken, but there's a lot of choices that Heinlein makes that like are not progressive in like a political or a social sense, but they're just like new. That like he chose to make that choice, and it was new for anybody at that point in time, and I really appreciate that bit of world building as world building existed in the book.
Yeah. I will also agree. I think like maybe the politics wasn't like the most interesting, and I think it was almost a shame that like they took this one of the most walked tropes in AI is like in like sci-fi is like a sentience waking up out of a computer system, and I found it a shame that like one of the potentially most interesting parts where they could have had like an unreliable Mike or something.
Yeah, and like Mike,
they kind of like disappeared.
Yeah, he does
like,
get
halfway
shoved
through
to the
book.
side. He's there as like a very practical thing just to make sure that the revolution is succeeding. And I certainly miss those conversations from like very early on where Mike is figuring out like who he is, what he is, and he's like learning with man, that sort of thing. And pretty much after the first couple chapters, it's almost gone entirely, right? It's only there just like a tiny little bit. And that to me, like I said already, that Mike was the more like the idea of like an artificial intelligence waking up and having self-awareness and growing and learning from people would have been probably more interesting than the politics and the nitty-gritty of creating this like resistance cell on the moon against the Earth. And I think like largely speaking, like the reason why maybe the book, like to me the book really had like no tension really and like no conflict, like not really too much to really grab onto, was because to me those things, like for conflict there has to be some kind of tension of like, will they succeed or not, and like opposing forces. Like if I think of like, I don't know, Game of Thrones, like it's interesting to see like Tyrion and the Lannisters on one side and Robb and the Starks on the other side, because you get both sides and you don't know how that conflict's going to turn out. And like you can clearly see like, well, Jaime Lannister was captured, but also it seems like Robb Stark keeps losing battles, right? So it's like this kind of there's like a give and take there, which creates a tension of what's going to happen next. But there really is no tension of what's going to happen next, because after a while you kind of realize like everything is going to work out in the favor of the revolution. Like nothing's going to stop it. Like Mike has been right about everything at this point, right?
I find myself kind of split on this point, because part of what I completely agree that there's not a lot of tension. Like when things are supposed to feel tragic, it's like, I barely even knew that character and now they're dead, so what? But there is part of it that's like, it is weird to say something is refreshing when the book's 60 years old, but it was engaging for me to have a story that like, I don't necessarily feel like the quote-unquote heroes of the story are in every chapter overcoming some insurmountable odds. Like maybe overall it was, but it wasn't this like, oh, you thought he was dead, but he's alive and he survived this battle, or like, I don't know. I think there's like a really intelligent middle ground there that, somebody who's an author and not me could describe. But I didn't hate the fact that the lack of attention had some benefits there for me, just in the overall storytelling.
Mike suggests throwing rocks very early on. That's true. So like we mentioned this earlier. So the moon has 2 catapults that they use to throw wheat down to Earth, to feed Earth. That's like what they primarily ship down, right? And at first, Earth views it as like a joke. They're like, oh, they're going to throw rice at us. This is a joke, right? So they've planned out where they're going to throw. First of all, I feel like this is kind of like, oh, that's very nice of them. The moon says, the Luna says, we're going to throw rocks at Earth. We're going to throw these things. Do not be here. This is exactly where we're going to hit. They're trying to hit places where nobody lives. And they say, do not be here. Evacuate these areas. Therefore, nobody will get hurt, right?
I love this part, by the way. This was great storytelling.
What's funny is that the Earth views it as all a big joke. So they're like, oh, they're going to throw rice at us. So people start to gather at the locations because they want to see, oh, the rice is going to land. They start to gather at the points where the rocks are going to hit because they don't believe that the moon can actually do anything to Earth. So they show up and then they're getting hit by these like gigantic like moon rocks that are essentially creating like tremendous explosions on Earth. So like tens of thousands die all over the planet. And that's where that's where planet Earth starts to like, oh shit, they start to like really freak out. And
they'd like precisely calculated, how can we show the Earth we have weapons without killing anybody at all, and they end up killing thousands of people.
Yeah, many. He got the future stupid America. I think America gets hit, one of the first ones. I think so. Oh, let's see. Let's get somebody else in. Let's see what do we got here.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem, Addy. Good to have you, dude.
I'm glad to Addy's train of thought. I do want to point out, and I think we talked about this in Discord. At one point in time, Hong Kong, which is on the moon, has to like donate all their computers so that Mike can build a backup. And Heinlein describes, oh, well, they don't have these computers. Now they need thousands of people using abacus to like calculate things. And it was just so funny that like that's the only technology that they had to revert to, was like, it's either supercomputer or it's an abacus. There's not a calculator on the moon. There's not an adding machine. But anyway.
Let's see. We got Z Pitt 27. What's up, Z Pitt? How's it going? Welcome in.
How's it going? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So a couple things. Just a quick aside from the plot itself. The writing portion got to me.
In a good way or a bad way?
It's awkward to get into with the voice, because like if I think of books like Trainspotting, where it's written in like a Scottish vernacular and it has a glossary of what these words mean if you're not familiar with it. You don't have any of that. It's just, oh, you know, I'm leaving words out and this is how I talk. And then like 250 pages in, when they're on Earth, it's like, hey, stop talking like this. Don't use the loony talk. And then it goes away for a bit and it comes right back in. So it kind of lost any sort of meaning for me in that respect. Like having a separate language that you can just immediately turn off because it's not necessarily needed.
I'd say like stylistically for me, it was like the first 30-40 pages, I was like annoyed by it. I was like, oh god, like is the whole book gonna be like this? I think eventually I just kind of like my eyes just kind of glossed over on it and I just didn't bother me anymore. But I could definitely see it being like something that would prevent you from like really, you kind of get used to it after a while, but I could definitely see it being something that would just prevent you from really grabbing it. It's not that bad, but it's just like, to me, it was like initially really irritating. And like after a while, you just don't even notice it anymore. So.
Well, just the point out that, you know, hey, just drop it. And it's like, oh, wait, okay. Is that a thing that could happen? Sure. And then in terms of like Mike dying at the end, I guess the main thing I was kind of thinking in terms of that was that I kept anticipating that there was a growing tension with Mike and Man throughout the story, because Man would question Mike and he'd be like, hey, why aren't you just trusting me anymore?
You thought there was like growing tension there?
It seemed like it, because he kept on questioning everything along the way. Like, hey, are you sure about these odds? You sure about these odds? He's like, well, yeah, I'm a computer. Why don't you trust me anymore? So at the end, I kind of took the dying as like the loss of that friendship on Mike's end. Like he didn't want to deal with it anymore because kind of assumes Man's a stupid now in that respect. He kept on questioning him, and you know, Man even's like, hey, you know, I run all these tests and everything is fine. won't respond to me anymore. So it's like everything near the end, he was pushing him further and further away. Like, hey, check on this machine, have him help out. And then, oh, make sure to call me, but don't talk to me. I'm busy. And just stop talking.
Yeah, I think for me with Mike is that, like, after a while, I almost want to say, like, I gave up on him. Like, I really wanted to hear more about, like, what was happening with him and what all was happening. And then eventually I just kind of gave up on the idea of him being, like, I don't want to say interesting. Like, he was always interesting, but I always wanted more from it. And then I eventually just stopped, like, waiting for it. So, like, I just kind of accepted, like, whatever he says is right. Like, he's going to guide them through the revolution. Like, he's going to do that. And they're like, I guess I kind of stopped looking for that. I really like the idea of there, like, being a growing tension there. I can't say I really picked up on it. It would be like, I know, I definitely noticed, like, Man would occasionally question Mike, but I never really, I felt like Mike would always just immediately deflate whatever tension was there. Because he'd, like, reassure, and Man would be like, all right, I guess, whatever, that's fine.
Talking this through, the whole Mike part of the story kind of feels like, and I don't know if I would say it was a worse version, but it feels like Doctor Strange in Endgame, where it's like, he calculates all the possible futures, and then, like, partway through the next movie, somebody's, like, talking to him, and he's like, well, everything's happened that needed to happen so far. Ugh. And, like, there it felt more like,
I hate Marvel.
Yeah, it's like, at least there, like, you didn't know what was, until, like, that next time that he said something, you really weren't thinking about it all the time. Right. And, like, I feel like in the book, it's like they talk about it too much for it then not to really mean anything and there not to be any stakes.
Yeah. So, like, later on, so after the initial rocks hit the Earth, like, Earth starts to, like, panic. Like, they're like, oh shit, this is, like, for real. So that's when the next, like, salvo of rocks is planned. And, like, we know that, like, Mike can basically aim these with incredible precision. And Earth has these, like, defenses that they can actually use to, like, stop the rocks from coming in. But I think that they basically calculate that there's no way they can stop all the rocks, basically. Like, some are going to get through. And I think they shoot so many rocks, like, they're planning, like, they're trying to hit New York, San Francisco, like, Dallas, like, all over the planet. And, like, some are going to get through and basically millions upon millions are going to die, right? And I thought, to me, this part, I kind of felt like that was kind of, like, chilling, because, when obviously, like, I think, what was the population of the moon? Like 3 million or 4 million or something like that?
Yeah.
You want to say, like, one life is worth more than another or something like that. But, like, it was like a very, like, it kind of stopped being like, I like, okay, well, I can excuse the rocks that kill people when they were trying to aim for places that wasn't going to kill anybody, right? But now we're aiming for the biggest population centers, and we're going to kill, like, millions upon millions. I was kind of chilled by that part. I was like, oh, well, this is becoming something very different now, isn't it? Like,
there was a point, like, early on, whenever they were planning all the rocks, like, it was very much like, this isn't going to hurt anybody. Like, we're going to, like, have some far in the ocean if we can't get, like, if we can't bomb, we can bomb Kansas, but we can't bomb Boston, so we'll put it in the ocean. Mm-hmm. But then there was a point that it was, like, describing all the coastal flooding and all, like, like, everything destroyed. It's like, the explosion didn't kill somebody, but you're going to have a tidal wave and, like, you're going to kill all the wildlife. And it was, like, I think that was purposeful, that, like, it was written like that to kind of have a chilling effect.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is where Mike also had an orgasm from all of his rocks hitting where he wanted the rocks to hit.
You might say he got his rocks off.
Yeah, he got his rocks off. And he says, like, don't worry, I've stored the feeling. I can experience it anytime I want. So that was like, oh, I see. My math was correct. And the stream, we peaked. Let's see. Try to get somebody. Hey, thank you so much, Z Pit. Thanks for joining us.
No problem.
Let's see. Triforce, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. How's it going, Triforce?
Hi, Dan. Hey, thank you for having me on.
Oh, not at all.
I just want to bring up a point that hadn't been made so far, and it was how propaganda was used, kind of by both sides in the book. it was something that the prof kind of worked on first to get all the lunards. I can't even think.
The loonies, right? The loonies.
The loonies on
That's
his
it.
side. And then it was interesting how to see how Earth was responding. Like you had that talk show host standing exactly where one of the meteors was supposed to land, like as a joking way, like, oh, they can't hit this, they can't hit anything.
Mhm.
And yeah, I was kind of hoping to see more of just like the everyday person, both on Earth and the Moon, how they're responding to all these talks about revolution.
Yeah, I think the most you see, like the people of Luna, there's like chapter 2 where it's like the big political meeting, like the rally, and that's where like the one guy gets his leg cut off and like they break it up. And then I guess you also get to see Man's family, but you don't really get to see too many like average people, right? You don't really get to see too many.
Right. They weren't mentioned a lot. And I hate to say this, but they were talking about like their pro loony hats, and it just reminded me of like MAGA hats.
There are little red hats.
Yeah, they're like, everybody wear your free Luna hats. I definitely thought that as well. I was like, oh my god,
Make the moon great again. Like in any time, there's a point where Mike has assumed the role of Adam, who's now this like fictional sit-in temporary president. And I feel like they try to bring in what the average loony's perspective would be when they're kind of addressing like how Adam is presented, and that they have to have like a real fictional office space, and that they have to come up with like convenient reasons why he can't come into person and stuff like that. But it all just kind of gets mushed up into book 2, where it's all just kind of gray matter, and so it doesn't feel like it has the intended effect.
To me, like looking at like all, like if you look at everybody who exists in this universe, I feel like it's almost like Homer. I feel like the writer is almost like Homer Simpson, where he's like, everybody is stupid except me. Like nobody knows what's going on except for like people on Earth probably wouldn't even understand or agree that the moon is being drained of its resources. People there are going to die. The average person on the moon has no idea that Mike exists at all, or that they're being led along by like 2 or 3 people. So like basically, like I almost feel like the only people who know what's going on, really, it's not even really Man either. It's Mike, kinda Wyo, but then not really, and Prof. So there's like kind of 2 or 3 people who even have any idea what's actually going on at any time. So it does kind of, and everybody else is just kind of like either a victim or along, or their interests are being represented by Mike and the others.
And even like Man's family, you know, at one point whenever they're like starting the cell system and they're like actually starting to recruit, there was a little bit of like, I don't know that we necessarily, like he brings his senior wife in to, like Man brings his senior wife into like his cell that's would be the 3 people under him, and he's like, I don't know that I necessarily want you to recruit other people in the family, and then like yada yada yada. Man's entire family is part of it, and it just feels like kind of like all of those other characters are just kind of lost in the wash, and
so like
everybody's just involved. And
yeah, when they're talking about Adam sailing earlier, I kind of wish that they had more of difficulty keeping him under wraps. Like no one really questioned the whole book why they couldn't see him in person. It was kind of like, oh, I'll just accept it, and it was so convenient for him to like just disappear one of the days.
Yeah, there was one point where it was like, I can't remember if they like staged an attack or if there was an attack,
They
but
used a random body from like someone who was too burnt up to.
well, no, before that, before
yeah,
the invasion,
yeah,
because like
that's right.
after the invasion, they said he just died, but like before that, there was like a bombing or something happened.
Yeah.
That there were, and then it was described as like, well, now everybody agrees that Adam shouldn't come out in person because there was this attempted or assassination. But
It would have been really
it
interesting
was
if,
just
like-
another example of like the Prof using propaganda to like convince people to go along
Well, I
with it.
think only
and not
one
ask
side is
questions.
really using propaganda like effectively, right? It's like the loonies are the ones, and like, well, Prof and Man and Mike, they're the ones that are really like the master manipulators here, because they're the ones pulling all the strings, and their propaganda is the one that's actually like having an effect both on the moon and on Earth, because eventually they actually succeed in dividing the Earth. So like when the threat of another salvo of moon rocks is coming in, that's where the Earth like basically breaks ranks. And I think, is it Kenya or something? Like, I can't remember which country does first. I think it might be Egypt or something. A country is like, we recognize the moon. We recognize don't target us. And like another country does it. And another country does it. And basically, like they all start to like recognize the moon one at a time, and that basically essentially ends the war in favor of basically Luna wins, and they're free at that point. Was it China? I don't know. It might have been China. I'm not sure. Kenya finished the first Earthside catapult. Okay, maybe it was Kenya then. Maybe it was Kenya. But hang on. Well, thank you so much, Triforce. I appreciate that.
Have me on. Have a great night.
Oh, have you too.
Thanks.
Let's see. So I tried to get him in earlier, and his thing wasn't working. Let's see. Are you with us, Dr. Drew?
Yes.
Hey, what's up, Dr. Drew? How's it going?
I'm good. Greetings from icy Texas.
Oh, what's the temperature over there in Texas?
We are up to a balmy 18.
Well, you know, Frostpunk has told me that's very warm, so I don't know, man.
Yeah,
I think it'd be fine.
yeah. I haven't seen. How is it like negative 80? Is that how bad it gets there?
I think it's I think Frostpunk is like negative 270 or something at one point.
Oh damn. Okay. Oh, our washer froze. That's about it. We're doing okay.
Goodness.
Yeah. So I would say the book as a whole, I felt was entertaining. Like I always wanted to know, okay, what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of the more you analyze it, the more it kind of falls apart, especially when you get into politics.
Mm-hmm. What is it you think falls apart?
So there was a point you actually made about how the plan for the revolution basically doesn't ever go wrong. There's never any real conflict there. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that everything Mike said comes true. I would argue a little bit. I would say everything Prof said comes true in reality. And that's what reinforces my thought that I've seen several other people make, that Prof is really just a stand-in for the author. And I kind of view the plot as John Everyman, Manuel, comes into contact with the Deus Ex Machina, hands it off to our author stand-in, who then uses it to more or less free the moon into this Randian paradise, or whatever he calls it.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked the book overall, but there's definitely some stuff I wouldn't agree with, I guess.
I guess eventually the moon is, it's all idealism, because like eventually the moon is not what Prof envisioned, right? So like I guess the moon is like another failure, I guess.
It's a failure. It's still, because he makes the point of, here's how it should be, but people really aren't ready for that, so we're going to kind of compromise, but I'm still kind of going to get my way in the end.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still going to have my free moon with my no taxes, and the government stays off my land, and I get my 8 wives, and, you know, all these kind of questionable things when you really think about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's always like that, like it's like the dissonance between like ideology of something like communism and then like the reality of the application, where it's like you have these like lofty ideals, and then when the reality is applied, they never live up to those ideals. And I think that's a lot of, I guess, like, is that just like political systems in general, right? Like Prof had all these political ideals of his ideal society, and then reality just, there's no way reality could ever live up to that. But maybe someday, right? Maybe someday.
Yeah, there's an optimism there, for sure.
Yeah, humans just don't work that way.
There's a lot of like, it compares a lot to the American Revolution, with all the like calls back to July 4th and Patrick Henry and all of this. And I think Benjamin Franklin got name dropped a lot. And then they never explicitly called it out, but the whole concept of, a penal colony becoming its own nation is very Australia to me.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of it was, let's port our libertarian ideals onto this unconquered land. And we finally have this is me speaking as a colonist here, there's no pesky natives in the way of our libertarian dream. We just have pure virgin land
That's
that
a
we
fair
can
point.
take over and do with what we will.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't
but-
really thought about it from that perspective of like, I guess there's no natives on the moon, so no,
there's no dark colored
Morality's not
people
gonna get in the
problems,
way,
for
yeah.
lack of a way to say it.
Interesting.
But, yeah, so that was really interesting to me, and I always love, this has been brought up a couple times, just the concept of we're 4 years before a man even steps foot on the moon, but we're trying to talk out how warfare would work, how how do you grow wheat on the moon when there's no sunlight, but we're doing it in tunnels. That really struck me as a little off, but it's fun to think about what is and isn't possible and kind of playing with that idea.
When I think of like really outdated science fiction, you remember those like old science fiction pulp things where like somebody lands on Venus and they step out and they're just like, they don't even have a helmet on. And like,
Yeah,
of course
they're
there's
just like-
alien. They're just like walking around, no problem. Like, oh, wow, this is Venus, huh? yeah. I thought it was actually aside from the fact that I really had a major problem with them growing wheat on the moon, I thought everything
Yeah,
else
that
was
was a
actually
big
pretty
one.
plausible though. Like everything seemed
Yeah,
like
I
I
liked all
believed
the,
it.
like the peace through talk and the Earthlings not being able to really do warfare well on the moon because they have it's like Vietnam but to a factor of 10. They have no idea about the terrain or how anything works there. So I like that concept. I guess it would have had to be Korea because Vietnam didn't exist in '65, but
I guess I would, I feel like you're making me think about the way the world was set up. I feel like there is something to be praised about the world building. Like there was one point when Man and Prof are on Earth and they're comparing life on Earth compared to life on the moon. And they're like, well, we have healthcare here on the moon or on Earth. And it's like, well, we don't have that on the moon. And they're like, well, we have like this. And they're like, well, we have to pay for our air on the moon. It was like all these like, I feel like it was really interesting to establish like the basic laws of like how life exists. So like on the moon, you have to pay for air. You have to pay. Yeah, these were all the plant, and they're also planted questions there because it was all set up ahead of time by Mike and Stu, right? But I think the world building overall was pretty decent, I thought, in the book, and I thought it was all plausible.
That was when they were talking about like taxes and stuff, and they were like the people on Earth were proposing, well, you should pay taxes. Like taxes for what? And I do agree that was especially on their time in Earth, that was a strong part of that narrative.
That was interesting.
There.
Yeah, I agree. I like that a lot.
So like at the last minute, I think this is right before the Earth basically recognizes that Luna is free. There's like 2 other cruisers that attack the moon because the moon is always like afraid like they're gonna H-bomb us, they're gonna blow us all to hell and we're all gonna die because they know that their like domes and stuff cannot survive it like at all. Like they're basically all gonna die. That at some point there was like a bombing or something, and I guess Mike had received like enough damage from bombing that basically whatever it was that was making him live was making him like alive and not just a computer, like went out. So yeah, like, and this just, it happens like very abruptly. It's just, oh, and now Mike is dead.
Yeah,
And-
so at this point, Man has gone to like a separate location where they've set up a backup computer, and the backup computer is sending all the rocks. And this is all planned so that like if Prof dies and Mike is out of the picture, Man and Mike's stupid son, which is the other computer, can still operate as a government.
I forgot about that. Yeah. He didn't have memory space
Yeah.
apparently. And that was so disappointing too, because it's like, man, and I think there's like the chapter before too, like Mike is still trying to ask Man about a sense of humor. And I still feel like I feel bad. It's like, oh man, like couldn't you like you turned Mike into this revolutionary weapon, and it's like he just wanted to find out about sense of humor. Like he just wanted to learn. It was like a child. He's like a child soldier. You know, like he never got the chance to be anything else, you know?
They did so many interesting things with Mike at the start. They like played with gender roles with the whole Michelle persona.
Right.
Mike was Mike when he's talking to Man, but he's Michelle when he's talking to Wyo, and then
And I do
he
think
becomes Adam later. But then it all just kind of yeah, he died.
I do think Heinlein wanted the end to be more philosophical because there's like, Man is he's contemplating like maybe Mike just lost enough parts and he's no longer there, or maybe he's like withdrawn back inside himself from like an amount of trauma. I don't remember how the book describes it, but it talks about like maybe he's just traumatized and so he's just like completely withdrawn. But I am disappointed that wasn't more like that could have taken another like 30 pages of the book.
Yeah, definitely. I was like, give me something with what happened to Mike. Oh, he's gone.
Yeah.
Okay, is he hiding? Is he traumatized? Is he dead? It's just, oh, well, maybe he'll show up one day in a sequel that we never wrote. Like,
I thought it was interesting that the only time Manny talks to God is the very end, asking if Mike counts as one of his creatures. Yeah, right. And that's almost like a lament. It's like a moment of feeling. You don't really feel much when the rocks are hitting Earth and people are blowing up and the random violence, but like that there was something special about Mike, right? Like because Mike was the only one. And that there is something kind of I feel like that's one of the only, like when Prof died it was like whatever, but when Mike died it was like yeah. Right.
What does it mean when the only death that means something to us is from an AI that may or may not even be dead?
Right. Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
know what that says about the book as a whole.
It probably does. Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for joining us, Dr. Drew. Appreciate your perspectives,
Thank you so
man.
much for doing this. This was awesome.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed.
All
let's
these
see.
people talking about like reading about space travel and stuff in such an old book. I want to mention C.S. Lewis had a space trilogy that he wrote in like 38 and 39, and like the first book they're like going to a planet in like a wooden spaceship, and it's really cool. And if you like really really old space stuff, the lore behind it is that Tolkien bet C.S. Lewis that he couldn't write a good trilogy, and so he wrote his space trilogy. So
I kind of like old science fiction, old stuff like that. It's so interesting in its own way. Before like everything was like kind of decided, and when everything was like new, There's a question in chat I actually want to respond to. Was Mike a slave? Interesting. That's a good question. Maybe our next person can answer that. Let's see. Let me get on Kit. Let's see. Kit, are you with us?
Oh, hello.
Hi, Kit.
Hi.
How's it going?
Back. Doing fine now. Well, what was the question again?
Is Mike a slave?
Yes. I think that Mike was really underutilized as a character throughout the story, especially on chapter 2. Because there's a section, I don't think anyone brushed on this yet. I didn't notice, at least, that they were explaining how the cells work, that they're making ternary circuits and how they interact with each other and all that jazz. And I'm like thinking, first of all, that was really boring part of the book, all the explanations. And then Manny mentioned that after a certain letter, age, I think, the H, they reach over 2,100 and something names, right? So, and Mike had to pick out the names, and he was the one setting up contact. They would all talk to Adam, that was his persona, but they didn't touch on what Mike was feeling at that point, because he was like, I'm Manny, I'm gonna present you to all the not stupid friends, and look at all these not stupid, they're gonna use it as a one of a kind super weapon to overthrow the government. And that was all he knew, right? So and then he has like 50,000 people working for him, because they get to J and letter J and K or whatever, that's like 100,000 people, right? So he has to talk to all these people. We don't get his perspective on what he thinks of, all the loonies of mankind as a whole.
Yeah.
If he could consider himself
There's
an
a
AI
lot
or
of things
just
we don't get from Mike that would have been so interesting to hear from Mike.
Yeah.
We just never
That's a
got
really
that.
good point as well, because like the book spends so much time on in the very early stages on like Mike talked to man because man was not stupid, and that
Yeah.
he wants to be introduced to other not stupid people, and then like a chapter later he is interfacing with 20,000 random people, and like
Right?
Mike
Yeah.
never goes through any kind of like rationalization or reasoning or discussion about like I have to talk to all these stupid people now or something.
I almost
That's a
feel
very
like
good
Mike
point.
is like he's man's friend, and man introduced him to his other new friends, Prof and Yo. And I almost feel like Mike is like the friend of a friend who like wants to be liked and like wants to be a part of something. So he's just I'll do the revolution, sure, of course. Like he's in from the beginning because he wants to be a part. He wants like to know these people. He wants to please the not stupids because he wants to talk to them. There's almost like a desperate friend in some ways, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
The
he'll do
desperation
whatever.
is, I sensed it when he says, "Oh my favorite, my first friend, my first and only friend," or Yo, my first female friend, or Prof, my most smartest friend, or he's always being subservient to them in a way, like always bringing up the friendship, like he needs to do that for them, or else he's not useful himself. He doesn't have any self-worth.
Imagine
If
at
he
one point
doesn't-
if like man or Prof were like, "Hey Mike, do you think what we're doing is right? Or like, do you think we should do like, is this the right thing we're doing? Like, do we have another way ahead of us or something?" Like, I feel like there's so many questions that could have been in there to get more of Mike's ideas and like his thoughts on everything. It would have been really interesting to have that perspective, right?
Yeah,
missed
and I'm
opportunity.
thinking now, because we're in the age of AI, so it's like what a zeitgeist moment to have a book about AI in a reading in this year. Like we're seeing what AI could be like, and
Mhm.
this one is like from like 80 years ago, in the 60s.
Yeah, like 66, right?
Wait, my math is off. Oh, well, whatever. Anyway, 6 years ago, yeah. Okay, so, but, it's funny because today, we're like thinking, oh man, gonna make AI that talks to us. It's gonna be so cool. We're gonna have a personal friend. And it's like the opposite in this point because the AI is yearning for friendship and not the loonies were like, well, whatever. This is basically gonna wins the war for us.
So did they
And that-
ask Mike at the beginning if he wanted to do it, and Mike said yes or something? Did they ask? I can't remember if they asked him.
I think it was presented, and this might be me misremembering where this came up, but I think it was presented in like he gave him the 1 in 7 odds, and then either then or at some point in time in the book, it's revealed that like those odds were with the assumption that Mike was
that he was with them,
critically
yeah.
involved. And so I don't know if they say it at the time, but I think we get that Mike factored himself in.
Yeah, I guess the question is, does Mike why, if Mike wants to help them and he's not just doing it so that they like him, does he want to do it because it's the morally right thing to do from his perspective? Does he want to do it because it's a joke? Does he want to do it like, why does Mike want to help them? Does he want to help them just because man's his friend and these are the only people he knows, so he like wants to help them? Like why, and I don't know if we really know exactly why, right?
Yeah, I'm inclined to believe it's just the friendship angle in my.
It was just
from
something
what
to
I
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the challenge of it. Oh, yeah. Because
Boredom. He did achieve orgasm from actually hitting his targets, right? So, I don't know.
I landed all those nukes. I'm gonna come. Yeah.
Oh God. All right, Kit. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Great seeing
Let's
you.
see. We got somebody else in. Let's send an invite. I think we're probably going to be wrapping up fairly soon. Sarah Nectum, how's it going?
Hey, Barb. Hey, Dan. Hey, chat.
Oh, hang on. Let me turn you up. Can you get closer to your microphone, maybe?
Sure. How's this?
Oh, much better, much better. How's it going?
Okay. Good, good. How's it going tonight?
Going good, going good.
Yeah. Mostly I thought the book was okay.
Mhm.
On there. I guess I just felt unsatisfied
Yeah.
during a lot of it. Basically with like a lot of people talked about like the tension and the danger not really ever being a thing because everything just gets fixed, everything goes well.
Mhm.
And then, so like at the beginning, they want to overthrow the authority, but then it turns out the authority is kind of idiotic.
Mhm.
They only have like 18 people to like guard the 3 million people.
Right.
And they go, the fix this, we'll just send 90 more goons.
Mhm.
And that'll do it.
Yeah, right.
And then them having the secret file for the security chief and watching what he's doing, and he's making all mistakes, and they're literally sending like prank calls to the
Mhm.
warden and all the people.
I guess it's like historical. Like, I guess lots of empires would like underestimate the people who are about to revolt, right? Like the British
Right.
Empire and blah blah blah. So I guess that there's like historical precedent for that or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and right. And so he didn't really feel any danger from the authority at
Mhm.
first. And you think, okay, oh, the Earth, that's going to be the real danger. 'Cause they're going to come bomb and kill everybody and put everybody back where they need to be.
Hmm.
But then when the ships come, they also kind of get just like destroyed pretty immediately. And it's
Yeah.
unclear, like, when they bomb, like, how much of a danger is the ship going to be when it comes down to bomb, like
Mhm.
a city or something?
I almost wonder if it would have been more interesting if, like, imagine if when rather than like having a random girl die, what if like Yo, like, all right, imagine I'm gonna rewrite the book briefly. Imagine when they send the Peace Dragoons and Yo is the one, like, she's one of the leaders of the rebellion, right? And Yo is killed by the Peace Dragoons, like they kill her instead. And then let's say like Man and Prof didn't know, but Mike intentionally killed Yo because he knew that that would get the rebellion, that would piss off the people on Luna enough. So like Mike was using her as like a pawn the entire time to like make the revolution happen, and like nobody really understood. Like I feel like whenever I had this when somebody else was saying it, I feel like I like all the different ideas people have of the book better than the book.
There needed to be like a secondary tension that like all the good guys can't all be exactly on the same page the entire time, and that's what it felt like.
And that's
Was
what Mike
that like
does. Like Mike never made a mistake at all. In which you start out with him being like, oh, he's this child and he needs to learn how to do these things.
Mhm.
But then he's just like always right for the rest of the book.
Yeah. I like everybody's rewrites of the book, I think, a little bit better than the book, but maybe I'm just sick of it after spending 3 weeks with it. That could also be that. It's like, why couldn't it be this instead? No.
Yeah, and then even like the major problem where it's like, okay, everyone's gonna starve in like 7 years.
Mhm.
Was that ever resolved at the end? Like, okay, the catapult was destroyed, and so they're not really sending anything anymore. But what happens next? As new catapults are being built on Earth, they're going to send supplies.
I feel like about 80, that's a good question. I feel like about 70 to 80% is like hand waved. Like they won the revolution and hand wave. Like they'll be fine. Like just don't worry about it. It's all hand waved away.
even
It's unsatisfying.
even when like the point in the book where Prof is like listening in on the loony government trying to establish their constitution and stuff, and he's like doesn't like all the stuff they're planning because it's basically like what America did after the Revolutionary War. And like you see kind of this moment where he's like trying to derail them and trying to make them second guess themselves because he doesn't agree with the things they're proposing, but then they're free and he's dead. And so we're basically left to believe that all of those things that they're proposing is what's going to happen. At least that's how I read it. Because without
Yeah.
Prof there anymore, like he was the only thing standing in the way of like history repeating itself.
But when Prof like speaks to them while they're like creating, trying to write that constitution, he doesn't offer any answers. He just
Yeah.
offers more questions. That's all Prof does. during the entire book. Is he just asks more questions to get people to think and try to nudge them in his direction, but doesn't actually say like, "Hey, you should do this."
This book taught me that revolutions are easy. Yeah, if you have a supercomputer on your side, I guess maybe.
I mean, I've got a supercomputer in my pocket.
Right. Well, hey, thank you so much, Sarah Necton. Really appreciate that. Yeah, good perspectives. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, let's see. We got a few more people in, and let's see. I'll get somebody else invited. So here's like another question, just like to think about, like what is like the future of this world? So like at the end of it, Mike is gone, Prof is gone, the moon is now like its own thing, and there's like a new, like what is the future of this world at this point? Like where do they go from there? I don't know. I really don't know. Like, does the moon, everything continues better? I almost feel like things are just going to get worse, right? Like again?
I feel like, and this might, I don't know where like my reading into it begins and where like what the author intended ends. But it feels like to me that it's written in a manner that like the moon is destined to just be another member of the UN that's, you know, operates as its own independent situation, but they're going to have the same rules and the same, like, they're going to devolve into the same system of,
yeah, it's like human nature will make it more or less.
Because even with like, okay, catapults on the Earth, they can send stuff to the moon and the moon can send stuff back, but like that's no different than every other independent country on the Earth. Like, how is the moon going? And like they're talking about tourism and gambling and all of this stuff that even Prof is like using to entice people.
It's the prequel
but that's
to
just
Aliens.
more of,
I don't think so.
yeah, it's just like more of them being the same, and they're kind of in a fight for their freedom. They're kind of just establishing their parity with all of the other free nations of Earth, which the book talks about at length as being antithetical to like what the revolution was about.
Right. We're joined by Kid Vid. What's up, Kid Vid? How are you?
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. How's it going?
Going all right. So my thoughts, people have already said a lot of the things that I thought. I did not care too much for the book, and I will say I actually laughed out loud at a few points because it read like parody to me. And so I haven't read Starship Troopers, but I can now see why Verhoeven made Starship Troopers to be a satire, because just a lot of like the politics of the book. There was a good spot where child jurors or children like paying Manny to like see if they could like kill some guy, and then like hiring jurors, and then him being like, hey, statutory rape doesn't actually exist. That whole passage was pretty insane.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah. There was more than a couple lines that were really creepy and weird out of nowhere from the book. And that was one I was like, what the fuck am I reading right now?
And just another, because people have already said a lot of things that I was thinking, but I know that it's like, oh, you know, he's a product of his time, but also like Ursula K. Le Guin was writing at this time. And granted, she's 20 years younger than Heinlein. She was born in like 29 or something. But she was writing like, in my opinion, like more meaningful, like Left Hand of Darkness is a book that like approaches like political things and approaches like sexuality and gender roles and all this stuff.
No, I've
in,
never
like,
read Ursula K. Le
smart,
Guin.
like
Never read her.
non-cringe way.
We should read that. I'm all for it. I've never read Le Guin. I'd love to put that on a book list at some point.
This is the second time in like the span of 4 days that somebody has brought up Left Hand of Darkness. I feel like I have to read it now.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's definitely it's a good book, and it came out like 3 years after this book, and like very thought provoking and like very good writing, and but Anyway, yeah, sorry. All just to say that I kind of just wanted to plug those points, is that I didn't really care for this book, and that yes, it's a product of its time, but also there were people writing at this time who were like maybe more conscious of certain things. But
Sure,
I don't
sure.
know. Anyway,
I think
I'm glad I read this book because I wouldn't have read it otherwise. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, this book was, I chose this book, like, my method for choosing the blind, like, voting it. First of all, the one criteria is, like, I hadn't read it before. And the second criteria was I was just kind of looking around for, like, best horror novels ever, best science fiction novels ever. Like, I was going on all those cringe, like, Google lists of, like, the best books ever in different genres. And I know I'd never read Heinlein. I've been interested just because I've heard of the name many times. And I was like, okay, this one, why not? I was completely blind. I had never read it. I had no idea about it.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad I read it because I wouldn't have read it otherwise. And so I was definitely interested to read it and to compare it to other stuff that I had read. But anyway, yeah, thank you for having me on.
Oh, not at all.
Appreciate
not at
it. Long time fan.
Oh, glad to have you, kid.
Yeah, love y'all.
But yeah, I mean, like you read stuff like this, and when something is like really either questionable in one aspect or like straight up disagreeable, you have to almost like take what you can from it, and then the other stuff either roll your eyes at it or call it out for being like, that's fucking creepy, that's weird, that's racist, that's sexist. Like, and then if somebody's like, if this is from 1966, you kind of like understand the context it was written, and like, there's probably somebody who was more progressive at the time or somebody like that. But I feel like it's like, take what you can from it, enjoy what you can, and like understand it. And I almost feel like judging it, like not necessarily judging it, I guess you can if you want to, but it feels kind of useless to me. Just, calling it out for what it is, and taking the good, like the good aspects from the bad and stuff like that. So you just kind of got to get what you can out of a book from something like this, especially when it's that much older. So, but thank you so much for joining us, dude. Let's see. We got just a few more people. I think we might end up with like a final, like, I don't know, maybe like a final vote on like, how good was this book? I don't know. How many options can I have in a poll? Not a lot. I guess I can have 5. Maybe we'll create a poll in the chat to vote for how good the book is. 1 through, if we can go through 1 through 5, I guess. Is it sort of fascist? I don't know if I'd say this book was fascist. I think the fascism claims are usually levied at Starship Troopers, but I haven't read Starship Troopers. I haven't read that. I don't think this book was fascist. I don't really think that at all about this one. So good book, gonna have to read it. Won't read it. Yeah, IGN gives it a 7 out of 10. Yeah. I don't think it was quite that. What's up, Trisgo? How's it going, dude?
Hello. I spoke briefly at the beginning. I have like one more thought and then I'll dip out.
Sure.
So I, like a lot of other people, have not read many fiction books since like high school. And so my perception of kind of how sci-fi plots develop is based entirely on like visual media. And so it was really interesting to take in the more like action heavy parts under the perspective of like what I'm used to, like movie pacing or like a show. And I really, really wish that there had been more than just like the 2 major scenes of conflict with like Shorty's death in the beginning of the book, and then like the invasion of the moon at the end, because those 2 scenes really painted just like an awesome picture in my head. And I kind of got how books could be riveting in that sense, which is something that was kind of lost on me in high school because of the curriculum. And
would you say when you really, like you said that you like mostly consume like science fiction from like visual and stuff, would you say like video games, movies, that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm 100% a movie buff. Although to be perfectly honest, most of the movies I've been watching recently are more like biopics. But yeah, like most of my science fiction consumption has been video games and movies. And so like reading a fiction sci-fi book, especially when it's like, what, 80 years old now? That was another thing that shocked me, is that sometimes I kind of forgot what technology didn't exist while this was being written.
Right. That's a good point.
Because it all, like, they would describe things and immediately I'd be like, oh yeah, that is this piece of technology. Wait a minute, that was invented in like the 80s, like we're 20 years before that. So yeah, like just overall, as much as the criticisms of this book, like I agree with basically what everyone else has said. It was really cool to like take in a genre that I love in a media that like I really felt deprived of in school.
One of the things I've always liked, because like I totally get it, because like for a long time I mean most of us, I think, before we start reading like full on novels or something, we usually either see movies or cartoons or video games or something first, and then later on you're usually like, I know for me, I was kind of forced to read books a lot of time when I was younger, and I would read like some Goosebumps or whatever, but making that leap into like full on adult books. And one of the things that I've always loved about books, like I actually, and I know people are gonna be like, oh, Mr. Hipster, I read Game of Thrones long before the TV series came out. And one of the cool things about reading a book that's like doesn't have like a TV or a movie or something is that you get to imagine these things, and you get to have a picture, like paint a picture in your head basically of what is actually happening. And if you have a movie or a TV show painted for you, it does all the work for you. So when you actually are imagining it, you get to create your own image. And I think like usually when you create that image like in your mind, like it's usually way cooler than whatever it is actually in a movie. Like to me, like I liked the Game of Thrones series when the Game of Thrones show came out, but it was so much cooler in my mind than what it actually came out to be. I almost feel like I totally agree that like the las guns and the conflict when like the troops land in the low gravity, I almost feel like to see it actually happen in a movie would actually like kind of ruin it, because like having that picture in my mind helps it a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Because like, especially going through the different paragraphs of describing different things, like you can sort of repaint scenes from previous pages with new information, and like the whole thing replays and just gets refined in your head with that theater of the mind, which for getting back into reading for the first time in like 10-15 years was like, oh right, this is why I liked doing this.
So are you going to start reading more books again?
I think I absolutely will. I've re-upped my library card, and I am going to put it to use.
Oh hell yeah, dude!
To like echo that even further, it's like it's a chance to then like take all of the media that you've consumed and then like imagine the version of it that you would create in this new setting, because it's like as descriptive as the book is in some places, it's also still like a blank canvas that like what you imagined like the lunar colony to look like is going to be completely different than what I did, but like we still like read the same thing and like had the same experience, but it's like yeah.
All right, well hey, thanks so much, Trisgo, appreciate you jumping in.
Absolutely, and thank you for doing this. Hope to
not at all.
Have it done again.
Oh well, probably will at some point.
Take care.
Let's see, we got somebody else jumping in. What's up, Thori? How are you? Good evening.
Hi, I talked earlier. I have some more thoughts.
Okay.
But to wrap things up, I think everything has been said. I think I can discuss this book for hours with you guys. So I just want to say I really appreciate you for organizing this thing, for getting people to read, for doing all the things. So I was talking with a couple of the guys, and we were talking like, how can we repay Barb for this thing he does for us? And the thing we decided on was, just kidding, suck my balls.
Well, thank you very much. Very sweet. All right. And he immediately left. You know what? How do we top that? I think that's a good note to go out on. I think it's all downhill. It's all downhill from there. Well, chat, I put a poll up, and it looks like you guys gave the book a perfect 3 out of 3 rating. Well done, guys. I'm going to assume you guys meant a 3 out of 5 rating. That's what I meant. I think you guys know what I meant with that one. I think you guys know what I meant. A 3 out of 5 rating. I feel like that's pretty fair. I feel like I'd probably land somewhere around there too, where there were some aspects I strongly liked and other aspects that to me were like non-existent. You know what I mean? So I feel like I kind of land somewhere around there. Well, what do you agree with that, Dan?
Yeah, I would say, I mean,
my perspective on it is like it was a really good and enjoyable read, but if I had more like recent things to compare it to, it would probably like I don't think the book, I'd probably give it a B minus, my personal score, but there's nothing that could make the book better. But there's a lot of things that if I had like read another book before it, it would have made this book worse.
Yeah, there's like, you know, I would like never reread this book, I think. I'd like never be like, oh man, I gotta go back and reread this book again. And like it's like maybe like intellectually interesting at times, but like never really like engaging where it's like I gotta see what happens next, or like, oh my god, this is so good.
I want to read Heinlein's other acclaimed works, but I would never like spend money on like something I had. Like I'd go read Stranger in a Strange Land, but I wouldn't read one of the other like 2 or 3 books they had at Barnes and Nobles that like I've never heard of before.
Sure.
Like that's where I would land.
If a book is like interesting to me, like that's fine. I can get by on that. If like a book is uninteresting and there's no like characters or anything and like there's nothing, that's where I like it's going to be a slog to get through. I can't say this was honestly like a slog. I'd say like the middle, I was kind of, my eyes were glazing over a little bit, but like it kind of picked, I think it really picked back up for me when Prof and Man went back to Earth. And that's where I was like, that's where I was kind of back in, because I was like, oh man, this is something is finally happening. This is interesting. Okay. So, I mean, it's definitely not, I would not list it among my favorite all-time books. I think like in the context of the time it was written, I could see it as being one of the greatest science fiction books like ever. But, you know, I can't turn the clock back and be back in 1966, can I?
Yeah.
I can't do that.
And I really appreciate that about like most media, because that's something that always influences my experience with something, is like, what did this mean in the time and to the, you know, the author, the actors, the directors. And so I did really appreciate that about this book, because it's such a like every step is like a building block onto like what we have today. So I appreciate the historical aspect of
right. Yeah, it's like it laid the road for where we are now or whatever, right? So hey Dan, you know, thank you so much. You were here all night, all 3.5 hours, and you were awesome, dude. You were awesome.
I'm 3.5 beers in, so
I had coffee tonight because I didn't know, maybe I need to get some beers in too. Then the book club might devolve into fighting, you know, like fuck
then
you.
It becomes like the a Housewives episode or something. Yeah. You know, I do think it like this probably was more enjoyable overall, because it wasn't like something that everybody was like, man, I love this book, I love everything about it, the characters were great, you know, yada yada yada. I think it was like everybody had stuff to like bring up and talk about, and we got to a point where I feel like people probably came in and like praised the book because they like probably feel like I do, where it's like I would be critical of a lot of things, but I did enjoy the book, so I kind of like how the night flowed.
Yeah, I think there was like a good mix of opinions, and there's definitely like there is nothing like my feelings are not hurt. Like I have no emotional attachment to this book whatsoever. I think maybe at some point I might throw a book on the list that I want to read, that like maybe I've read once before and I would like to read it again or something. But like I would want a variety of opinions for sure. It's great when you have, I loved it, I hated it, I enjoyed it. Like I really like I want those perspectives for sure. So that makes it more interesting.
It was really funny because like the first book I read after this was a random book that I picked up just because the cover looked really cool, and it was like literally dealing with like advanced AI and like an intelligent
it was
alien
like a soft
species
sequel.
It was yeah, and it was like a 2023 like first novel from like an author that did nothing but short fiction, and it was a really interesting like 1960 to 2023 take on like AI and consciousness and stuff. So.
Yeah. Sounds cool. Maybe we should throw it on the voting list for next time if we do another one. You love the book club? Thanks, Barb. Oh, you're welcome. Well, thanks, Dan. Thanks for jumping in.
Yeah,
and,
I'm glad to be here.
I hope you have a great night, dude. Oh, thanks, Dan. All right, guys. I think that is it. I think that is book club for this evening. Hang on. guys, thank you guys for watching. I think that's going to wrap up the book club. That was Stranger. Here, let me swap back over here real quick. That was The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert A. Heinlein, book club number 1. I don't know if there'll be a book club number 2. We shall see. Maybe sometime in the future. Probably not immediately. We'll probably let it cool off for a little while. There was like a bunch of subs tonight. I didn't thank like any subs or any bits. And there was like a decent amount. Guys, thank you for all the subs. I'm sorry. I just didn't want to interrupt people and be like, yo, thank you for the gift sub. We didn't need like stone cold interrupting somebody. we didn't need that. But thank you for all the subs tonight, guys. Censored Cashew, Fortified, It's Gomu, Never Had Fun, Iowa Hawks, Watch Games, Just Fod, Jargon, Dreg Basher, Rutherford Jangles, Matt from Kalamazoo, Sobcheck Security, Un Employer, Master and ACV, Gradient Step, Grimskin, Moonraker, Memon Machine, Lambini, Papadocio, Just a Must, Wrecked Bank, Grambo, Big Gosh, Lady Solarina, Lanciar, Blade ADL, Cam Gravy, Arnez, Platnaz, Dradao, TTU Lang, B-Set, Moonface, Rocket Skates, Beefy Fife, TTU Lang, Feral W, The Argus, Miss Mary Mac, Anecdotally, Glue on Tunes, Robo Baggins, Sonzer, Young Horsey, Badass Bard, B-Dubs, Captain Napalm, Clintos, That OGD, Markup, Freakazoid, Nemesis. Thank you for all the subscriptions. Thank you for the bits. Really appreciate that, guys. Thank you so much. Cosmic Octopus, thank you for the 61 months. Thank you very much. All right, guys. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for hanging out. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's stream. Possibly we will do another book club in the future. We're gonna give me a little bit of time. We'll let it cool off for a little while before we do it, and we'll definitely give people plenty of time to read the book. So thank you guys for watching. Let's find somebody who is streaming and let's go on a raid. Let's go raid somebody right now. Let me throw you guys to, I'll throw you guys over to Zach, who is doing Elden Ring level 1.